Good morning. The Prime Minister's own cabinet tell him it's time to go as an avalanche of almost 80 MPs turn on Sir Keir Starmer.
There are reports that even the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, are demanding his resignation after Starmer's last-ditch attempt to rally the party fell flat.
The election results last week were tough. Very tough. We lost some brilliant Labour representatives. That hurts. And it should hurt. I get it. I feel it. And I take responsibility.
As Angela Rayner rubs salt in the Prime Minister's wounds, warning it could be a mistake to block Andy Burnham from returning to Westminster.
Andy Burnham should never have been blocked. It was a mistake that the leadership of our party should put right.
So, with the Prime Minister on the brink, is this the day Starmer accepts it's all over?
With a crucial cabinet meeting just hours away, you don't want to miss a single moment of what is shaping up to be a historic day in British politics. It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Alex Armstrong, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Could today be the day?
Yeah, it really does feel like all of the dominoes are ready to fall for the Prime Minister. Of course, the critical thing being this cabinet meeting coming up in the next few hours.
9:30 this morning.
Yeah, I've heard reports, I know everything. It's just completely, it's lots of things going on at the moment, but lots of reports suggesting Cabinet are going to tell him to go, that he must set out a timetable to leave. But who knows? He's very stubborn. Will he cling on? I mean, we've heard this all before, haven't we? The Prime Minister's going and he somehow stays.
Yeah, this is, of course, our top story today. Is it endgame for the Prime Minister? Well,
the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is among 3 reported Cabinet members urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign, with 79 Labour MPs now joining the growing mutiny.
But that's not all, as 6 ministerial aides have quit, as ministers are expected to warn the Prime Minister that his position is now untenable.
It follows Sir Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling onto his premiership following Labour's disastrous local election results. Just how well will his comments age?
I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I've got some doubters, including in my own party. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I have to prove them wrong, and I will. And I take responsibility for not walking away, not plunging our country into chaos, as the Tories did time and again, chaos that did lasting damage to this country.
Well, let's speak to GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster, who's at Downing Street for us this morning. Morning to you, Catherine. It was a late night there last night, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Good morning from Downing Street, and here we go again. It feels now inevitable that though the Prime Minister is saying that he's going nowhere and he's going to prove his doubters wrong, it's looking more and more like he's not going to be given the chance. And as Boris Johnson once said, when the herd moves, it moves. The herd in the Labour Party is moving. We've now had well over 70 MPs publicly calling for the Prime Minister to go, to set out a timetable for his departure. It really is quite surreal, because this, of course, is a government that was elected partly promising to stop the chaos, to stop the infighting that we saw when the Tories cycled through a whole load of prime ministers in quick succession. Now here we are, and it seems likely that we will soon, or certainly by the end of the year, have our 6th Prime Minister in 7 years. So where are we this morning? All hangs really now on the Cabinet. They're meeting in just a few hours here, and we know that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, yesterday went into Downing Street and urged the Prime Minister to set a timetable for his departure. Now, we also know that other cabinet ministers went in, among them the Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, the Defence Secretary John Healey. We understand those conversations were more nuanced. supporters like the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary, still urging the Prime Minister to stay put. But for all the Prime Minister says he's not going anywhere, it looks like the decision is taken out of his hands. So all eyes now on the Cabinet. I've spoken to people inside Number 10 and in the Labour Party more broadly who feel really very depressed, alarmed and sad about what is going on. They think, look, of course there are issues, but they have no idea who is going to replace the Prime Minister. We've got 2 wars going on, an incredibly difficult international situation, the cost of living going through the roof again. We've also got a King's speech happening tomorrow. I couldn't believe it. I had to be dropped by the car quite some way away and walk. There were marching bands at 5:30 in the morning going along the side of St James's Park, planning for a King's speech at which the King tomorrow is going to unveil this government's legislative programme for the next Parliament. And yet it could be that today the Prime Minister is forced to say that he is going to stand down and a leadership contest begins. A lot hangs also on Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. He's been very, very quiet, but many say his fingerprints are all over this. Some of his ministerial aides resigning last night after the markets closed. All eyes too on the markets this morning, who are not going to like what is going on.
Catherine, while we've got you, let me ask you about this, because all eyes are now on this cabinet meeting, this impending cabinet meeting, which I'm sure ministers are already up and early preparing for. There is a split, as you've suggested, in the cabinet. We've got some of his most loyal allies, people like Shabana Mahmood, who's clearly not in their interest for him to go, calling for the Prime Minister, or seemingly being reportedly urging the Prime Minister to stand down. What will happen after that cabinet meeting if there is a split? What should we expect to see?
Well, there definitely is a split. We know that. I think all hangs now on what the Prime Minister decides to do. How many people in Cabinet tell him publicly that the game is up, and whether he feels that he can stay on. If he decides that he's got no choice but to go, we could see the podium out here again today. Really quite astonishing. If he doesn't heed the advice, if the bulk of the Cabinet are still saying, look, we know it's difficult, we've had horrendous results, but we don't know what comes next, things could be so much worse, hang on, then this potentially goes on. Will the drip of Labour MPs calling for him to go continue? Will those government resignations tick up? They began last night, very junior ranks at the moment. But that could change. The Prime Minister is hanging by the thinnest of threads, and it does feel like that thread is going to break and he's going to fall. But at the moment, nobody really knows what's going to happen next. And of course, the favourite among many Labour MPs, Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the only Labour politician in the country that the polling suggests would do better than the Prime Minister at the moment, is out of the running. He doesn't have a seat.
Oh, such a mess. Catherine, thank you so much for bringing that to us. We will not miss a thing. You're going to be there for us all morning. Thank you so much.
Should we talk to our guest in the studio? Fraser Myers is joining us. Fraser, I mean, what a day. What a day it's going to be today. There is so much speculation because it really isn't entirely clear yet as to what we might expect. The Prime Minister could indeed cling on another day, which every day now is more time for him, as we've seen Prime Ministers do, like to just cling on to the last second. Or we could see a spat of resignations from cabinet ministers if they really want to get rid of him.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think all the political logic says that Keir Starmer is finished. You know, he had those atrocious local election results showing that he's lost the confidence of the public. We've had, you know, around 80 MPs saying they have no confidence in the Prime Minister, and we've heard of cabinet ministers telling him to resign, and I'm sure there will be more in that cabinet meeting urging him to go. But the Prime Minister is not a very political man. He doesn't understand politics. So we're basically, if he were a normal politician, I think, then yes, we could say confidently that we'd be seeing that podium out there today. Yeah. But he isn't. He is strangely stubborn. He doesn't understand that the party's turned against him. He doesn't understand that he is not capable of turning things around either. If you looked at his speech yesterday, this was supposed to be his big make or break speech where he was going to turn things around. What did he say in that was new, that was bold, that was exciting, that was going to win over the doubters? He said he had doubters. I think he has enemies, haters.
Yeah, doubters.
It's
half the country or more. Probably, his approval rating is at -45, I think, the last time I checked. And that is the absurd thing about all of this, is that despite being so deeply unpopular with the British public, inside his own party now as well, he still seems to think he's got political capital left.
And he seems to think that he is delivering something or other that is going to rescue him, that there is some Labour programme going on behind the scenes that's going to turn everything around. There isn't. The public is absolutely wise to the fact that this government is not doing anything that is changing their lives for the better in any way. I suppose the worry is, are any of the replacements going to do the same thing? But you know, when he was talking about we can't have incremental change anymore, we need bold change, then he couldn't actually
say closer to the EU and Steele and Scunthorpe.
That seemed to be the only things, and most people thought. Again, a lot of this speech was recycled, even though it was supposed to be. I think Guido Fawkes worked out that 65% of the announcements were recycled. British steel nationalisation, that's all well and good, but everyone thought that had already happened.
Yes, well, it has.
There's nothing new, is it?
The government's been running it for a long time.
Exactly, the government's been running that plant for the best part of a few months. Getting closer to the EU, we've known that that's Keir Starmer's intention. He re-announced a youth mobility scheme. Again, I really don't think this is what the public is crying out for in an election that was really, about immigration, the anti-immigration party doing the best.
But it was quite clear yesterday that he wasn't speaking to the nation, was he? He was speaking to the party, and he was giving them what he thought would be catnip. But it appears it wasn't anywhere near enough. And as Catherine just put it there, the Prime Minister is hanging now by the thinnest of threads. When does it snap? Could it be today in that Cabinet meeting?
That's absolutely right. I think that will have been the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people, because he simply did not meet the moment. Yes, I think with the party, it could snap very, very easily today. A lot of people don't see a way out of this for Keir Starmer. But again, we are relying on his stubborn self being able to recognise reality in the face. And it seems as if that speech from yesterday is anything to go by, if any of the reports we're hearing about his determination to cling on or anything to go by, then perhaps he will never recognise reality.
Indeed. That speech as well, as I think, is really important, because this was bigged up all day yesterday. We were sat here...
Can you believe that's 24 hours ago?
I can't believe it, Ellie. Honestly,
so
I can't. It feels like a week ago at this point in time. But it was billed as his moment to save his career.
Yeah.
I think predictably we all watched it and thought, I mean, goodness me, this is not talking to the nation. This is not talking to anyone on the centre of his party. This is really talking to the left wing of his party, the people he seems to fear the most, the ones, Angela Rayner. We're talking about Andy Burnham, the ones who are definitely not lending him their support at the moment. Things like far-right agitators, which has really incensed so many people. He's talking about this rally, this Tommy Robinson rally that's happening on the weekend. He didn't mention any other things like the Palestine marches, which, of course, there have been a lot of condemnation of lately. It really was a speech for the left and the far left.
I think that's right, or certainly to the party faithful and not the nation as a whole. And it just reminded you of everything people hate about Starmer, because it was totally light on policies, no real principles being or values being articulated, and it was heavy on wooden cliches. I'd want to say that strength through fairness, this new slogan he came up with, that could be... I'd say that would be his political epitaph, but we've probably forgotten it by the end of the week.
It's the opposite of Trump's strength through peace, isn't it? I mean, you really can't make it up.
Can we talk about Wes Streeting, who's been very quiet in all of this? Is he waiting for that number of MPs publicly calling for Starmer to go to reach that magic number of 81, do you think, before he says anything?
Well, some people are suggesting that he's been the trigger for this flurry of resignations, particularly the junior... the aides who have been resigning. Many of them are Wes Streeting allies. One of them was his own private parliamentary secretary. The thing is, the magic 81 number only counts if it's attached to a particular leadership candidate. So I think it's symbolic, of course, to suggest that such a large number of MPs want you to go. And again, if Keir Starmer had any sense, he would realise that the game is up. But he seems as well to be biding his time. I mean, what could happen is, interestingly, the timetable will be important. If Keir Starmer does resign and there is a leadership contest, the timetable will be important because a faster transition could benefit Wes Streeting, because that means that no Andy Burnham will be in Parliament and he won't be in play. But then again, the soft left group of MPs, the Tribune group, they have said explicitly that if Wes actually manages to do a stitch-up, if he becomes Prime Minister without Andy Burnham on the scene, then they will topple him. So maybe Keir Starmer's right that there will be a bit of chaos to come if he leaves, but at the same time, you can't see him clinging on. It's unsustainable. His position is unsustainable.
All right, shall we talk now to political commentator and, of course, former Conservative Party advisor to Michael Gove as well, Charlie Rowley. You've been here before. You've seen it all, Charlie. He's been sat in the corner of the room shaking from the PTSD. Charlie, you don't think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what we've been discussing before the show started, you're not entirely convinced the Prime Minister's going?
I'm not, and for a number of reasons. First of all, the Cabinet meeting today is called by the Prime Minister. So the idea that it's just a session of ministers coming in to tell him that the Prime Minister, you need to go, is not what's going to happen. You know, it's going to be an agenda of the economy, the NHS, talking about the steel nationalisation, all the other great breakfast clubs, all the other great things that this Labour government are doing. It's going to be a rah-rah-rah from the Prime Minister, all the great things. You know, it's going to be very difficult at the end of that meeting, when you get to, you know, item number 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever it is, any other business? Shabana, Prime Minister, you should resign. You know, it's going to be very difficult in that meeting for the whole Cabinet to then turn against the Prime Minister. But
when the herd moves, it moves?
When the herd moves, it moves. But then the conversation is, OK, Shabana, you know, I understand what you're saying. You want me to go. You don't think I'm the man for the job or the person for the job. You have to then take the decision to either resign from my government or name the person that you want to succeed. And as Fraser was saying, we can get lost in the hype of 81 MPs saying that the Prime Minister should go. There could be 150 Labour MPs that say that the Prime Minister should go by the end of today. He's got 411, I think, MPs on his backbenches. He's got ample room to manoeuvre and to replace those individuals. 6 resignations. I know a big headline, but these are parliamentary private secretaries. They are essentially the bag carriers to the actual ministers. They're not ministers themselves, so we can get lost in that headline as if they're a great big number of people resigning. Boris had far more people resigning under his government, as did Theresa over Brexit deals, and she was still able to form a government. You know, it harks back to... those are a couple there. So the Cabinet meeting itself, I don't think is going to be as seismic as what we would maybe want it to be or think that it should be, given that the country has rejected the Prime Minister. Obviously, the local elections were terrible for this Prime Minister, but Gordon Brown was able to hunker down in 2009, a man that's just been brought back under Sir Keir Starmer. So he's got people on his side that knows how to see off these kinds of coups left, right and centre. You know, the King's speech is coming tomorrow that we're talking about. Unless there are resignations today, unless the Cabinet actually resign and say, Prime Minister, I think you should go, and the Prime Minister rejects it, and they say, right, OK, then I will go. That will be the moment where he has to resign, I think. It won't be on the numbers of people coming out calling for the resignations. It won't be on the back of difficult conversations. The Prime Minister is a process Prime Minister. That's why he's unpopular. Yes. That's why he doesn't get the politics. And the process is that you have to name an alternative to succeed him. And until people do that, he is in number 10, he's in command.
Do you think we could see Cabinet resignations today? How realistic do you think that is as an option? If it goes as the way you say, and you don't think that the Cabinet meeting will be as seismic as the papers are pointing out this morning, does that then leave them with no choice but to start resigning from their posts?
I think it is. In any other week, it could be more plausible. But again, just think about the conversation that you're going to have around the Cabinet table. If you're Wes Streeting saying to... If I'm Sir Keir Starmer and you're saying to me, Alex, as the Health Secretary, Prime Minister, I think you should go. OK, I'm not going to do that, Health Secretary. I appreciate everything that you've just told me. If you want to resign, it'll be a loss. I'm sorry about that. But I have got the King's speech coming tomorrow. Do you want to up sticks the whole what could be the whole reset of the Labour government's package? It's not the speech yesterday. There should have been more in the speech yesterday. It was unfulfilling. It was underwhelming. But we've got the King's speech coming tomorrow, which should be the reset of the whole Labour government. This is the last chance saloon. Now, are you going to be the one that does that? I don't think so.
If you're Wes Streeting at this point in time, thinking about the political landscape here, he has got, in my opinion, a very limited amount of time to move before the left of the party mobilise, which they are trying desperately to do. So every day that Starmer decides he wants to hang in there is a better day for Andy Burnham, it's a better day for Angela Rayner, as we've seen them say. They're not actually calling for the Prime Minister to go, funnily enough. It's all the people that don't want those two in who seem to be warming up to the idea of Keir Starmer going. Starmer and Wes, as far as we've been reported in the Telegraph at least, have had a conversation. Wes has apparently told the Prime Minister he's got a plan for government, a plan for being Prime Minister. Would it not be politically astute for the Prime Minister to say, I'd rather the man that's going to follow my agenda be next than somebody like Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham who will completely rip my agenda up?
Well, but we don't know what Wes's plan is. I mean, what is his plan?
We don't know, but apparently he might have told the Prime Minister what the plan is. So I guess my question for you, Charlie, is...
Well, he might have done.
Is it better...
But, does the Prime Minister care? He's the Prime Minister. He's not budging. He's not going to go.
But I guess the question is if Wes doesn't go this week, has he got another opportunity where he's stronger than he is now? And we know Wes is desperate for this job, and that's what everyone says. Everyone that knows Wes Streeting, he wants to be Prime Minister. He's even said it multiple times.
Well, the frustrations could mount throughout the week. There's no doubt about that. It could be a terrible King's speech tomorrow if we get that far, which I think we will. Just because there is nothing really, as it pains me to say it, there is nothing really before me that actually sees the Prime Minister leaving. You can have, as I say, 80 disgruntled backbenchers. It's 80 out of 411, right? That's not... It's a sizable number, don't get me wrong, I'm not underestimating it, but for a Prime Minister that's tone deaf to most things, he'll continue to be...
Is that because you're a Tory and you're used to regicide, where Labour is not used to regicide?
Well, no, but that's the point. They're not used to regicide, so they don't have... all those 81 MPs, 70, whatever we're up to now, 79, we'll get to 80 today. We'll get over 100 today, I would imagine. If they were organised, if they knew how to actually... If they were conviction politicians themselves, they would say, Prime Minister... Thank you so much for your time and your service. You were leader of the opposition for a great 5 years. You took over from the Corbyn years when we were in the wilderness. You were brilliant then. You got us into government. It hasn't gone to plan. You've had 2 years. Your time's up. I want Angela Rayner or I want Andy Burnham. I think Wes Streeting would do a better job. I think Ed Miliband actually could do a far better job, whatever their position is. None of them have done that. Right, so they don't know how to do this. They've never been in government enough to do it, unlike the Tories that have had multiple years to get rid of their leaders. So that's why it's so, I think, difficult to see how the Prime Minister does go to it until you actually see resignations. That's what did it for Boris. Sajid Javid resigned, quickly followed by Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor. If the Chancellor decides to go today, whoa, fireworks and popcorn, get them out, because that would be seismic. He would be losing senior cabinet ministers that he would have to be trying to replace. At the minute, it's just bluster from disgruntled backbenchers who are on the far left of the party anyway, who would rather have it been Jeremy Corbyn still in charge. Whilst we're at it, the speech yesterday talking about closer ties with the EU, OK, that feels tone deaf to me, and on the back of the local elections results where he's lost a lot of the red wall in terms of council seats, constituencies, wards, councils that voted for Brexit that felt that, Westminster wasn't working for them 10 years ago. Every other Labour potential leader is calling for closer ties with the EU. So Starmer is not saying anything that any other successor would be doing differently. So it's all tone deaf to the general public. It's an internal Labour Party issue. Yeah. But until somebody actually pulls the trigger politically or is able to force the issue, the Prime Minister is behind that big black door there. He's hunkering down. He's not coming out. He's staying there for the next 24 hours until the King turns up tomorrow with a King's speech that has been written by the Prime Minister, that the Prime Minister obviously wants to be delivered, which will hopefully be the reset moment for his premiership. And let's see how that goes. The Prime Minister is not going anywhere today.
OK, Charlie, that's Charlie's opinion. Let us know what you think. You will certainly have reviewed, gbnews.com. your say.
Well, I know what our next guest is going to say. Former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, good friend of mine on my weekend shows. Paul, pleasure to see you up this early in the morning. It's usually quite late when we're catching up about politics. Paul, I'm assuming you're going to echo very similar words to Charlie Rowley there. Do you think the Prime Minister could lay out his plan to leave today with a Cabinet meeting happening in just a couple of hours' time now? The Cabinet is split. We've heard reports of Yvette Cooper calling for him to go, or we've had reports of Shabana Mahmood urging him to consider his position, John Healey, the Defence Secretary. Whatever happens, he's on borrowed time, isn't he?
I think it was Harold Wilson, wasn't it, who said that a week is a long time in politics. I mean, you and I discussed this on Saturday night on your excellent show, and I was absolutely convinced that nothing would be happening and it would all, fizzle out. I'm still quite convinced that the Prime Minister will still be the Prime Minister by the end of the week, but obviously an awful lot has happened in the last 3 days, really, and in the last few hours even. So the answer to your question is it is now possible that they will strike some sort of deal with the different warring factions to set out a timetable. I think it's less likely, but I think it is a possibility now. Charlie's analysis just now, by the way, I tend to agree with because he understands the internal politics of the Labour Party, even though he's not a Labour Party member. He's absolutely right. We don't have the same mechanism inside the Labour Party that the Tories do to get rid of a leader with the same alacrity. It's a long, drawn-out process. When Tony Blair went, I remember this vividly, of course, he did it because he felt that the damage being done to the status of the government was such, with the resignations that affected him, that he really ought to set out a timetable. But the difference was, of course, Gordon Brown was there in the wings. He'd been waiting 10 years, not 2 years, 10 years, and Tony Blair had already won 2 terms and felt it was a good time to go. So fairly different circumstances to where we are now with the Prime Minister only 2 years into a 4.5-year, 5-year term. So Charlie's right. The King's speech is vital. Tomorrow it's got to set out a prospectus for change that people can actually buy into. But there's no constitutional mechanism whereby Starmer has to go unless he wants to. The evidence is he doesn't want to.
Well, no. Paul, what do you think Labour MPs are thinking when they're talking about this orderly transition of power that they would like to see? What would that look like to you? Because it seems to be politically naive, doesn't it, to think that this could be orderly. At this point, it seems anything but. You've got Angela Rayner, who's got this outstanding HMRC investigation. You've got Andy Burnham, who doesn't even have a seat. And Wes Streeting, who looks as though he'd be the front runner and in pole position right now. But the left of the party have already said if he were to go for the leadership, they'd ambush him.
Well, quite, and that's the nub of the issue, isn't it? That unlike the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown psychodrama of 20 years ago, there isn't an obvious candidate in the wings. There isn't a single person that everyone can unite around, which is why these 80 MPs are not signing up to the Wes Streeting for Leader campaign. They're simply saying, well, maybe we need to look at a succession plan at some point, blah, blah, blah. But it's not a deliberate leadership bid, because of that 80, most don't want Wes Streeting to be the leader. And in fact, I would say probably 40, 50 of those are people who would definitely not want a sort of centrist, moderate Labour leader. They would want somebody from the hard left. So there isn't an obvious contender in the wings. There isn't somebody that they can unite around. Of course, a huge block of the Parliamentary Labour Party want Andy Burnham, and that means they want to delay the timetable. Because he's not an MP yet, and they want to try and find a way that he can come back, and that's hard in itself. The NEC might still well block him, and then of course Angela Rayner has her supporters too.
Just
so
on
there's
that
the
point,
warring factions. Yeah.
Just on that point, can the country really be held in limbo for that long to wait for Andy Burnham to contest that by-election? He may not even win it.
Right. And again, that's another wild card, isn't it? So what this adds, I mean, you said what are MPs feeling? They are feeling, some of them are furious. I've spoken to several who are absolutely furious about this, just think it's destabilising, it's narcissistic, it's awful. Others are saying, yeah, no, we listened to what people said on the doorsteps, with great reluctance. We think it might be time. But that famous phrase, orderly transition. Since when has the Labour Party ever done an orderly transition? You know, this is not in our DNA. We're not good at this. We've got lots of rules. They take a long time.
Yeah.
You know, we like it row. And I mean, my fear is it looks like to the country that we are just having a mental breakdown in public.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Paul, can I put
very
this?
Unedifying.
Yeah, Paul, can I put this to you? The Telegraph reported an MP involved in the rebellion has told them this is all happening because the Cabinet hasn't stepped up. This could have been a lot more orderly. They should do it tomorrow at the Cabinet meeting. That was, of course, yesterday now. Many MPs frustrated by the Prime Minister's speech, which many say has had nothing new in it. There was no incremental change, or there was no sign of radical change, should I say. Is it now down to the Cabinet? Because if the Cabinet decide to rally round the Prime Minister, that growing rebellion of MPs could become so seismic that they all lose credibility. And that's the difficulty for these Cabinet Ministers now. They have to determine how... Because by process of elimination, if you're standing by the Prime Minister and not resigning, you are part of his government. You are part of his plot to stay in number 10. Therefore, that damages them in the long run. How long, realistically, is it that those Cabinet Ministers can hold the fort down?
Well, I mean, in theory, you know, the Prime Minister could just sack a third of a cabinet that he felt to be disloyal and bring in different people to be in the cabinet. The gift of who is in the cabinet is absolutely in the hands of British Prime Minister. So he could, you know, in that scenario that you paint, which, by the way, I don't think is going to happen in quite that way. He could survive that. Was it Macmillan? I think who had the Night of the Long Knives. You know, he sacked half his cabinet, whatever it was, back in the 60s in order to carry on as Prime Minister. So, you know, there's nothing constitutional. Again, there's no rule that says just because 2 or 3 disgruntled cabinet ministers left, that means the Prime Minister has to go. And I don't think we're there. You know, I mean, the block of loyalist cabinet ministers is still in place, but we'll see. I mean, I started this interview by saying it's very fluid, and it is very fast moving, and we're all trying to read the runes, but it is hard to tell. The cabinet meeting this morning, of course, a vital signal. We'll see who goes in and what the mood music is, what the leaks are from that, and then of course the King's speech with a prospectus for change for the country. So we might look back on this as a bit of a blip, a moment of madness, and Starmer carries on, or it could be the pivotal moment, and it is the moment where we see a Prime Minister being brought down by his own party. But I mean, either way, I just despair, because the public must be watching this thinking, well, what about my potholes? I can't get an appointment this morning for the doctor. What about my kids' loans at university? I mean, so there is a moment where this government has to inflect back onto the needs of the public and not its own psychological drama.
Paul Richards, really good to get your perspective on things this morning. Thank you so much for joining us on GB News Breakfast. And it's a good point, isn't it? This is a Prime Minister that promised no more chaos, no more infighting, a politics that would tread lightly on our lives. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. It feels like a lifetime ago, Ellie. Can you believe it's 1 year, 10 months ago?
Yeah, I said to Alex this morning, I said, how has this happened? We haven't even had 2 years of this government. He said, in fact, it's been 1 year and 10 months. And look at the state of things. Yeah,
I mean, again, because the media class at the time, the establishment media, and just frankly social commentary, because the Tories were in such a mess, everyone thought this was just going to be back to normal.
The grown-ups in the room.
The grown-ups are in the room. Remember all of that? That nonsense?
That?
A lot of people, a lot of egg on their faces at this point in time, really. It really is embarrassing for them, given that they bigged up this government as a return to normality, as a return to the quiet times of Britain, a little island of peace and tranquility. I think some top journalists quoted it being as. And look where we are.
Anything but.
Anything but that, Ellie. Anything but that. And I think the British public, frankly, are sick to death of this. Sick to death of all of it. They want change. That's why the demand for yet another Prime Minister's head, politically speaking, is now on the chopping block.
Well, if you just have woken up this morning, this is our top story today. Is it endgame for the Prime Minister?
Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is among 3 reported cabinet members urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign as Prime Minister, with 79 Labour MPs now joining the growing mutiny.
But that's not all, as 6 ministerial aides have quit, as ministers are expected to warn the Prime Minister this morning that his position is untenable.
Yes, it follows Sir Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling on to his premiership following Labour's disastrous local elections. Just how well will his comments age?
I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I've got some doubters, including in my own party. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I have to prove them wrong, and I will. And I take responsibility for not walking away, not plunging our country into chaos, as the Tories did time and again, chaos that did lasting damage to this country.
Well, at Downing Street for us this morning is GB News political correspondent, chief political correspondent, I should say, Catherine Forster. Morning again to you, Catherine. And you put it about half an hour ago, saying the Prime Minister was hanging by the thinnest of threads. What could happen at this cabinet meeting this morning?
There were other cabinet ministers, including the Foreign Secretary.
Yes, good morning from Downing Street, where here we are again. It looks very much like yet another Prime Minister is going to be removed. All eyes on the Cabinet meeting in just a few hours from now. Officially, they're going to be talking about the war in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, the economic impact and how bad that already is and how much worse it's going to be getting. But we know that the Labour Party is having a collective nervous breakdown following those catastrophic results last week in the local elections in England, in Wales and in Scotland. And we also know that a whole load of cabinet ministers came to Downing Street last night with varying messages. Now, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, said to the Prime Minister that he should set out a timetable for his departure. We know too, and they didn't march up Downing Street, they come in through the Cabinet Office where they don't want to be seen by people like me hanging around in the street. That Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, was also here, that the Defence Secretary, John Healey, was also here. It's not yet clear exactly what they said. We understand those messages from them, probably more nuanced. Some in the Cabinet are still saying to the Prime Minister, you should not go anywhere. Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, a very key ally of the Prime Minister, Steve Reid, the Housing Secretary too. But look, you know, I've spoken to cabinet ministers weeks ago who said that the plan was Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the most popular Labour politician in the country, is the man that many feel would give Labour a better chance of digging themselves out of this horrendous hole that they are in. But he doesn't even have a seat. The Prime Minister said yesterday that would be up to the NEC. They blocked him before. It's sounding like there might be some movement from them now. But where does that leave us? If this all kicks off, as well it might, if the Prime Minister is forced to announce that he is going, what happens next? Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, is on manoeuvres. We know that he has said to the Prime Minister that he doesn't want to mount a leadership challenge, but if it becomes clear that the Prime Minister's position is untenable, that he will be ready to go. Some of his ministerial aides resigned last night after 6 o'clock, after the market had closed. That would suggest that he is beginning to make his move. What of Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister? Well, she's still in the middle of a tax investigation because she didn't pay £40,000 of stamp duty on a flat in the South Coast. She spoke yesterday and she said it was a mistake to block Andy Burnham. So there is no agreement here about who should follow the Prime Minister if and when he goes. And I have spoken to people last night in Number 10 and in the Labour Party more broadly, who are frankly horrified and very sad and very concerned by what is going on, because they feel that for all the problems that the Prime Minister has, that he offers stability, and without any idea what comes next, that things could get much, much worse. At the moment, We simply don't know what happens next, but it is completely surreal here. As I arrived, I had to walk quite a long way because the roads are closed, practicing, the troops out, marching bands at 5:30 in the morning, practicing for the King's speech, which is going to be given by the King tomorrow, outlining the government's legislative agenda, a government that is in absolute turmoil.
Catherine, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? I can't believe we're back here yet again, just only a couple of years since the last Prime Minister, not even that, actually. Catherine Foster, thank you so much. We'll be back with you in Downing Street very, very shortly. Please keep an eye on that door for us. Down the line, we have Reform UK leader of Elmbridge Council, Harrison Orman-Varty, joining us. Harrison, good morning to you. This is not a good situation for the country. However, I suspect your party can claim victory out of all of this because, at the end of the day, has your party not pushed for local elections and took the government to court, I doubt we'd be having this conversation. That'd be a fair comment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This isn't the first time Farage has put pressure on a Prime Minister to leave. Obviously, you look what he did in the European elections with Theresa May and what happened shortly after, especially when you look at the platform that Farage and Reform were putting forward. Their message was simple. It was to get Starmer out. And that seems to be quite effective. To be honest, I think there's some irony in this. When people think about what Keir Starmer was saying just a few years ago, and you listen to take the moral high ground and telling Boris to go and all that sort of stuff, and yet it seemed to bite him 50% of the way through of what Boris got through. So, to be honest, the only thing that people seem to be saying as well, Keir Starmer, is at least instability. But does he even have that? I mean, he's not even stable within his own ideas with the amount of U-turns we've had. The knives are definitely out. I think it's just a matter of when.
No clear successor here, Harrison, if the Prime Minister decides to go. Andy Burnham doesn't even have a seat in Westminster. Wes Streeting, we're hearing from the left of the party that they would ambush him if he were to go for the leadership. From Reform's perspective, who would you like to see in order to challenge as Prime Minister?
I think I can quite confidently say that the position that Reform would like would be a general election out of all of this. I think there was never any sort of enthusiasm put for a Labour government in the first place. I think that it's fanciful that people are talking about Andy Burnham as if he can just be kind of dropped in to as an MP. We've clearly seen that there is no seat that can be taken for granted for Labour or that is indeed safe. When you especially look at the by-election that we had, indeed in his own backyard up in Manchester, the Greens won it by actually quite a margin. I don't think there's any seat that Labour could kind of walk into easily. That was certainly one of their easier ones. To be honest, I think this could be Keir Starmer's Liz Truss moment. When you hear him speak yesterday saying, I'm going to carry on, I'm not going to quit. It's a bit like Liz Truss saying, I'm a fighter, not a quitter. And then 24 hours later, she's on the steps of Downing Street. I don't know when that will be, but it does seem like he's at the point of no return. And if these rumours are correct about the cabinet turning on him, it certainly is only a matter of time.
Harrison, we say you want a general election now, but it's not ideal timing for Reform to have an election right now. The local elections have just taken place, and it shows that the party is polling at about 26-27%. What you really need, if you want to form a majority government, is some more time, perhaps, to get your policy agenda sorted out and to tell the public why you should be the majority party. Would that be fair?
I think, to be honest, when we're looking at things like the national interest, it's a case of a question of, well, can the country endure any more of what Labour is doing? And I think the answer to a lot of people would be, well, no. When you're putting things in that framing, it's a case of, well, there is simply no choice but for a general election. We can have debates about readiness and things like that, but I think the one thing that is clear and ready is people are just ready to get rid of Labour. I take your point, and potentially that question is probably slightly above my pay grade, but one thing I will say is that when it does come to things like the national interest, there is definitely appetite for a general election by just looking at the state of the local elections, and it's just a case of how much more can the ordinary British people take. It certainly does feel like we're at breaking point.
But the country may want a general election, and there will certainly be an argument, let's say that somebody does succeed Sir Keir Starmer, that they don't have a mandate from this country. But the Labour Party are not going to be turkeys voting for Christmas.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the point. The only scenario really where I can see a general election happening is if there were to be a leadership contest. There are two very strong factions within the Labour Party. You have the lefty loons and then the kind of the moderate boars. And I can see the Moors tearing themselves in half. Whether they try put someone like Wes Streeting, and you hear some of the comments that we heard last night. Some people say, Wes Streeting wouldn't last as long as Liz Truss. And then you have some of the other people, maybe on a further left, but then you think that isn't compatible, for example, with, I don't know, the more economic people, if there are any, in the Labour Party, and how the economy will react to someone further left. So, to be honest, the only scenario I can see is the Labour Party itself tearing itself in half, trying to figure out who the successors should be to Keir Starmer.
Yeah, Harrison, I think this is the thing, right? The British public are desperate for change. The Prime Minister has somewhat acknowledged that yesterday. He says the change needs to be more radical, that this incremental change isn't working. Is there a case to say, let's hear the Prime Minister's King's Speech tomorrow. Let's hear what their plan is for the country. Perhaps the message has sunk in. We know that Keir Starmer, let's face it, is not a good public speaker and is not a convincing man when it comes to speeches. However, perhaps you could argue, many would argue at least, the Prime Minister is on the detail of things, and perhaps tomorrow we might get a surprise and the radical change is there. Are we all jumping the gun?
I think, to be honest, that will be the case that Keir Starmer will be making. Certainly this morning is certainly the tool to buy time. Look, the key things are really, when you're, I mean, as someone who's obviously just been in an election campaign and knocked on nearly 5,000 doors, that the key things are, obviously, for lots of Labour voters and indeed Reform voters, things like illegal immigration, where they've promised change and if it's got far worse. Things like the economy, where they've promised change and people aren't seeing the real tangible, impact on what they're doing. So, to be honest, regardless of what could come out in this, people still feel, and that's the important thing, worse off than when they got in. And when you're promised change, and that was obviously the one word that he had on his manifesto cover with a photo of himself, and they don't feel as if they've got that, then obviously there will always be that craving to have something new, because they still feel as if they've been unfulfilled on that promise for change.
OK, Harrison, Eamonn, Varty, really good to get your perspective on things this morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Right, now we're joined by political commentator Christo Foufas and Labour councillor Sebastian Selleck in the studio here. Good morning, you two. Well, we'd normally be doing a paper review at this point in time, but there is only one story in Britain right now that is worth discussing, that everyone wants to talk about, and that is whether or not the Prime Minister is going to go today. Sebastian, the party's now in freefall. I think it's fair to say there is a civil war between the left and the centre-left of the party. Wes Streeting being pitted as a potential candidate for the centre-left, and for the further left of the party, Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham wanting more time. It is now a battle, isn't it, really, to see who goes first?
It is, and it's something that the Labour Party is so bad at. They just haven't had much practice, and the mechanism isn't there either.
It's not in their DNA, is it?
It isn't, but also the system doesn't make it easy for them. And I think clearly there are many who do want to see some kind of movement now, but they are operating within a system that is hamstringing them to a degree. The challenge also is, what happens next? What we don't want is a period of stasis. We cannot afford that as a country. So whatever route we find out of this has to be a way where we don't see the country come to a halt. Remember, we've got the King's Speech in a couple of days' time.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. You've got a whole agenda laid out. They were rehearsing for it this morning. You couldn't get into Downing Street this morning because there are marching bands rehearsing. Which is extraordinary. Probably the biggest case for the PM to stay, at least for now. You can't lay out your plan for the next 1 or 2 years and then walk away.
Christo, what do you make of all of this?
Well, yesterday's speech, this make or break speech, was one of the most bizarre things I think I've witnessed in politics, because you would imagine that a make or break speech where you have just lost a number of council seats, you've lost so many of them to the Reform Party, and your pitch, your final roll of the dice to the electorate, you say to that electorate, who have just gone to Reform instead, we're going to get closer to the EU. What a bizarre pitch to the electorate. What a bizarre thinking. What on earth was he thinking? But then, of course, and I was listening to you on the way in, Ellie, and I heard you make this point. He's not listening. He wasn't talking to the country. He was talking to the left of his party. That's precisely what it's for, and that's all he's ever talking about. So the piousness and the hypocrisy of, I'm not going to plunge you into chaos. I'm doing you the favour by staying, and this is what I'm going to do by staying. I'm now going to talk to my party and nothing else, and anything I come up with is going to be for the left-wingers in my party rather than what is best for the country.
But is that not what we're going to get anyway, Christo? So if the Prime Minister goes, surely we're going to get a more centre-left, a more left, even further than that, perhaps, government, regardless. So whether Starmer does it or the next person does it it actually matter?
Well, I don't want him to go. I mean, I'm making it clear. No, because I think that because I'm such a fan of his, I think he's such a good Prime Minister. I love he's amazing. He does such a good job. No, it's because I think that it will mean that this government rumbles on for longer. I think we'll end up with a period of nothingness. Before then, we end up with a new Prime Minister who will have to take the party further left, because you're absolutely right. The problem is the 400 MPs that are all practically bordering on communists that are the issue. But also, I think it will then mean the media and the electorate say, oh, give Angela Rayner a year or give Wes Streeting a year. And the only hope to save our country at the moment, and from the absolute mess that we are in, is a general election and a new party. And so my worry is if Starmer...
Even if there's a general election, it looks like it'll be a hung parliament, which will be chaos in itself.
Okay, well, I am from anyone but Labour or Greens. Anyone but Labour or Greens at the moment. I'd even have a sprinkling of Lib Dem at the moment, and I never thought I'd say that. I mean, whenever you Ed Davey is looking like a more attractive proposition, you know you're in trouble. But I don't want this to rumble on, and I think if Starmer stays, we've got more chance of there being a general election sooner. Okay. And also stopping the party going even further to the left, because whoever they choose will be the most left-wing candidate. And we've seen how the markets are talking about what would happen if Angela Rayner comes in. We've seen all of those sorts of predictions. So I really, really worry, and I think actually, dare I say it, the least worst option for now is that Starmer stays. And the only thing we've got in our favour for those people who think like me is his complete lack of ability to read the room and his absolute stubbornness to do what's best for him rather than the country. And that might well go in our favour at the moment.
Sebastian, Susan here on your say says, hello, Alex and Ellie, good morning all, and good morning, Susan. I don't want Starmer to go. He's doing a great job for reform. And that's the message actually from Nigel Farage the other day, wasn't it?
Is our greatest asset?
Is he Reform UK's greatest asset? Is it actually a hindrance to your party to continue the Prime Minister sitting in number 10?
Well, the longer Reform's in opposition, the longer they survive. They are fundamentally a pressure group. What we haven't seen from Reform is any kind of answers. And I put this to one of their spokespeople over the weekend. I said, give me your economic policy. And he just couldn't do it. Can you imagine, in a country where the cost of living is the most important issue, we would all agree on that, they cannot give you an answer. All they want to do is talk about immigration.
In their last manifesto, they actually had some fairly good ideas, I thought, about raising the tax threshold. I think it's a fair point to say, look, how well would that work now by bringing that in quickly? But they did want to take the lowest paid people out of tax. They did have the idea of national insurance being higher if you're going to hire from abroad, but exempting the NHS from that because it needs immigration from abroad. Not getting rid of immigration altogether, but net zero immigration as well. So that seemed to be a bit more balanced. So I think when you
not balanced, though. When that gets stress tested by anyone with any economic credibility, it crumbles.
I mean, I think that they have got a challenge to be not the immigration party. I think that's a fair point, but I think that we need a party that's a little bit more Thatcherite and a little bit more low tax, high growth.
Well, is that actually what people want now, Christo? Because when we look at what people are demanding, when we look at the state of the world, talking about renationalising things like British Steel actually goes down quite well with the British public. We're talking about war footing. We're talking about a time when the British government may need to own more things, own our energy, own our oil supply, own our steel manufacturing. Is Thatcherism really the answer?
Well, I think that Oh my God, that's a really big question. But
Sorry.
I think that's all right. I can handle it. It's fine. The problem that we have with where we've ended up with privatisation, in my humble opinion, is that I don't think that where we are now is what Thatcher actually envisaged. Thatcher was absolutely obsessed with the public getting a good deal and competition actually being the thing that drove down prices and improved service. Back when nationalisation wasn't the thing, I mean, you'd wait 3 weeks for your phone to be installed by British Telecom because it was the only provider. You know, if your gas broke down, you'd be left without it for weeks. The competition for a while worked in making it more efficient. What's happened now is you have this cartel, and you do not have the true competition that I think Thatcher envisaged in this. And also, when you factor in globalisation and you factor in immigration without workers' rights, that's when things start to get dodgy for people. So I think that Thatcherite rather than Thatcherism, I would be sort of light Thatcher. It would be the way I think.
The problem also is that we talk about both nationalisation and privatisation as some sort of panacea, when the truth is, and I think you were probably touching on it there are some industries that are better off nationalised and there are some that are better off privatised. I don't want a national broadband, for example. I want to be able to compete there and go to a different company.
I agree with that.
But I do want a nationalised train service because it is essentially a monopoly anyway.
Well, the two I would nationalise, and again, I think that Starmer, this is the thing, there is such low-hanging fruit that he could go for. For instance, the trains. You can't have true competition on the trains because there are one set of rails, and until you have 20 services that go from London to Leeds on different sets of rails, which you're never going to have, that's not true competition. Water. I mean, it is ridiculous that water is privatised when it's essentially a monopoly.
Exactly.
That is brilliantly low-hanging fruit.
Grid. Yeah.
The National Grid. There are so many areas where you could actually appease the left of the party, but also logically it be a more centre-right policy because you can't actually have the competition.
This comes back to the other part of the political problem here, is that the working class, Seb, where we've just seen the big part of why we're having this conversation today, I was saying this earlier on, is because Reform UK, of course, challenged the government, forced these elections to go ahead. I don't think we'd be having this chat today had that not happened. But the reason why you've lost the Red Wall, you've lost Wales, you've lost the working class parts of Britain, is because the industrial policy is catered to what I would say the North Islington elite, I think is the word for it, the rich suburban people rather than the working classes. They want to see things like the steelworks be renationalised. They want to see things like energy production brought back to Britain. And that's the problem here, is that the people feel the party's forgotten who it is, and it's the same reason perhaps why the Tories got booted.
But even the Prime Minister looked confused yesterday, didn't he? I mean, he had rolled up sleeves. He was tireless. He was stood in front of a Union Jack. He was in a windowless room in London. I mean, who was he speaking to? Who was he speaking for? He didn't even seem to know. The whole image of Starmer seems very confused.
Yeah, and look, this goes back to what I think is quite a fair criticism, that there is no narrative of this government, which is hugely frustrating for me because I write about this stuff every week. I pull up all of the policy that is being passed, and there's so much good stuff, but it doesn't sit coherently under one story that's easy to tell.
Yeah, but I think, I'm sorry to jump in on that, but that irritates me, I'm afraid, and it's quite often you irritate me, Sebastian, because it's a little bit Bridget Phillipson and a little bit what Keir Starmer was saying yesterday, in as much as, we're doing a really good job. You just haven't really seen what a great job we're doing. Our message isn't good about the good job we're doing, and it almost blames, maybe that's not what you're saying, but that was definitely the message from Bridget Phillipson at the weekend. Definitely, I think, a little bit of it from Starmer yesterday. It's almost, we're doing such a good job, but we realise that the hope wasn't there. We realise that the narrative hasn't given you the hope you need. And it sounds a bit like, don't you realise what a great job we're doing? Don't you understand we're doing so well and you just haven't understood how well we're doing? That's not the problem here.
Look, I think there is an element of there is a comms failure. I think there is an element of give it a bit more time. All of these things need a period to bed in. But there's also an element of we are essentially in an emergency situation and none of us are acting like it. And look, I don't agree with Reform's policies, but there's a certain level of extremism to them. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. But there is a certain level of acknowledgement of the depths of the situation that we're in. And I wish Labour would take that energy and apply it in a more progressive way.
Can I just make another quick point about where we were talking about the EU and competition and Thatcherism and all of those sorts of things? Again, one of the things, I voted Remain, as you know, I'm the Ramona on this channel in chief, but I absolutely can see the absurdity that we used to have around being a member of the EU, that, for instance, if we were doing a massive infrastructure project like Crossrail or something like that, we weren't allowed to say, we are going to have a British firm build our trains, because EU rules didn't allow that. Now, again, if we're talking about an industrial base, a manufacturing base, you could have placated the reform voter yesterday, but as well as the left of the party, by saying, right, we are going to harness one of the terrible deals that we had with Brexit of the Conservatives, and every time we have an infrastructure project here in the UK, it's going to be a UK firm that creates whatever we need to manufacture for that project, because that's something we didn't need to do under the EU. And why isn't that his pitch to the nation?
So I agree with that would be a sensible way to go, but there are two problems. The first is that when we say placate reform voters, who are we talking about? Because there are reform voters in Blackburn, but there are reform voters in Bromley, and they're two very different people, so we mustn't lump them all into one. The other problem is bigger when it comes to infrastructure. We just aren't building any. We are relying on our Victorian railways. We are getting hung up about HS2. We've done that for years, and it shows time and time again that even if projects come in over time and over budget, like Crossrail, the second they're done, everybody forgets about it and it's a roaring success. And we can replicate that on a national scale, whether it's reservoirs, whether it's railway lines. We need to be doing it.
OK. Sebastian, Christo, we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. You're going to be back with us in 45 minutes' time. Good morning. The Prime Minister's own cabinet tell him it's time to go as an avalanche of almost 80 MPs turn on Sir Keir Starmer.
Yes, there are reports that even the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper are demanding his resignation after Starmer's last-ditch attempt to rally the party fell flat.
The election results last week were tough. Very tough. We lost some brilliant Labour representatives. That hurts. And it should hurt. I get it. I feel it. And I take responsibility.
Angela Rayner rubbed salt into the Prime Minister's wound, saying it was a mistake to block Andy Burnham from returning to Westminster.
Andy Burnham should never have been blocked. It was a mistake that the leadership of our party should put right.
So, with the Prime Minister on the brink, is this the day Starmer accepts it's all over?
Well, with a crucial cabinet meeting just 2.5 hours away, you don't want to miss a single moment of what is shaping up to be a historic day in British politics. It's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Alex Armstrong, and this is GB News Breakfast.
We were saying, weren't we, that a week is a long time in politics. Well, what an extraordinary 24 hours we've had, Alex.
It's like every hour is a long time in politics now, Ellie.
So
we just
true.
don't know what is going to happen next. That is why we are rolling with this story, because anything can happen at any moment in time. It's now 7 a.m. We have ministers will have already been up early today talking to their aides, talking to the people around them, talking to their party members before they go into this cabinet meeting today. Some of them have already had their own private secretaries resign. It's a very important role for the minister there. They act in many capacities for that minister. They will be going in today. We already know heard reports of John Healey, Yvette Cooper, Shabana Mahmood, people who are loyal to the Prime Minister. Of course, we know Wes Streeting wants the job, don't we? He's going to add him to the...
He's being very quiet, isn't he?
Well, that's always a sign, isn't it?
It is,
It's always a sign. So, Ellie, I think this is anything can happen at any point in time. Even this morning, we could see a resignation.
Absolutely, because what is going to be said in that cabinet meeting at 9:30? And if it doesn't go the way that certain cabinet members want it to go, will we see resignations? As you say, anything could happen. But the big question is Is it now endgame for the Prime Minister?
Yeah, Sir Keir Starmer could be forced to step down in a few hours' time as he faces a cabinet showdown over his future.
Well, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is among 3 reported cabinet members urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign, with 79 Labour MPs now joining the growing mutiny.
And that's not all, as 6 ministerial aides have quit, as ministers are expected to warn the PM his position is untenable.
Well, this follows Sir Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling onto his premiership following Labour's disastrous local election results. So just how well will these comments age?
I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I've got some doubters, including in my own party. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I have to prove them wrong, and I will. And I take responsibility for not walking away, not plunging our country into chaos, as the Tories did time and again, chaos that did lasting damage to this country.
All right, we're now joined by GB News' political correspondent, chief political correspondent, should I say, Catherine Forster, who is outside Downing Street for us. Catherine, this is going to be a very fast-developing morning, I'm sure. You're going to see very soon ministers piling into Downing Street. What will you be asking them as they head into the famous black door of number 10?
Well, I think people will be asking the Cabinet if they're going to tell the Prime Minister that it is time to go. It's a critical meeting. They're supposed to be talking about the situation in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, of course, already sending our bills through the roof, likely to get much, much worse. But all that currently overshadowed by yet another huge drama in government. And this is a government who just a couple of years ago got elected promising to stop the chaos, to offer stability. Country first, party second. It feels like a long time ago, but we are in uncharted territory here, because while the Conservative Party is pretty brutal and good at getting rid of prime ministers, the Labour Party does not do this. They don't get prime ministers in very often, and really we don't know how they are going to get rid of the Prime Minister, or indeed if it's going to happen now, though it does feel like it is absolutely terminal. Now, we know that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, came here last night and did ask the Prime Minister to outline a timetable for him to go. We know too that the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, were here too. We understand that their message was a bit more nuanced. But what comes next, if and when the Prime Minister is forced to go? Nobody knows what happens next, because Andy Burnham, who is the favourite among many because he's the most popular Labour Prime Minister in the country, the only one that the polls suggest would be better off with the public than the Prime Minister, doesn't even have a seat, and no guarantee that even if an MP stood down right now, he would necessarily win a by-election, or that the NEC would allow him to stand. Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, still mired in a tax row with HMRC. She didn't pay £40,000 in stamp duty on a flat in Hove. And then there is Wes Streeting. He's been pretty quiet recently, but I'm just off the phone in the last few minutes with a key ally of his, because there are mutterings from some who are cross with Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, who think that his fingerprints are all over this. A couple of his ministerial aides went last night after the markets are closed, but that ally said to me that Wes Streeting has not been involved in any of this, that he has not asked anybody to go over the top, but that he has been honest, because he has told the Prime Minister in the past weeks that he will not move against him, but if it becomes clear that the Prime Minister cannot go on, that he is ready to stand for the leadership. And this ally said, look, at least Wes Streeting is being honest, whereas there's all sorts of others manoeuvring who would like the job who are not being honest. But let's see who speaks in Cabinet and urges the Prime Minister to go. Of course, it's supposed to be leak-proof, but we know that it never is. We don't know what comes next. We could end up with a very, very messy situation quite quickly, because I don't see much prospect of an orderly transition, given there is no agreement on who should take over. And for all that Wes Streeting might be best placed at the moment, there's many people in the Parliamentary Labour Party that do not like him, that want somebody on the left. We could end up with Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary. We could end up with Angela Rayner. We do not know what happens next, and things could get substantially worse, especially if the markets take fright. They will be opening, of course, shortly.
The whole thing is just extraordinary, and that's before we even get into the fact that tomorrow at 11:30 it is the King's speech, which is meant to be the reset of this Labour government. You couldn't make it up, could you, in terms of timing?
Thank you.
To be honest, and I probably shouldn't say this, the whole situation is literally blowing my mind. I really struggled to get here this morning at 5:30 because all the roads around Westminster are closed for the King's speech. There were marching bands at 5:30 in St James's Park practising for the King's speech. A massive moment tomorrow when the government, the King, will read out the government's legislative agenda for the next parliamentary term. And yet here we are in a situation where the Prime Minister could potentially have to say that he is leaving as soon as today, and then he would be a caretaker Prime Minister for we don't know how long, and then somebody else would come in and no doubt have very different plans. It really is quite extraordinary. And are we now looking at a sixth Prime Minister for the United Kingdom in just 7 years? It really is just quite unbelievable. And some thinking, is the country now becoming increasingly ungovernable? They got rid of the Tories, people wanted change. This government has had 2 years, it hasn't delivered the change that people want. Now people are looking around for change again. They're looking at reform, they're looking at Plaid in Wales. People want change, people want to feel that their lives are getting better, and yet since the financial crisis we haven't had the growth. The country has not been doing well. We're not alone. Much of Europe hasn't been doing well either. And, but is changing leaders at this point with 2 wars on going to make things better, or is it going to make things worse?
OK, Catherine, we'll be back to you in about 30 minutes' time. Thank you so much.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by Deputy Editor at Spikes Online, Fraser Myers. Fraser, I've just been reading Dan Hodges' column in the Daily Mail today. He's got some great, obviously, he's one of the first journalists that tweeted that a Cabinet Minister said the Prime Minister will resign this week. This was a couple of days ago now, believe it or not. He is quoted here in the Mail saying, I spoke to another Cabinet Minister about rumours Starmer would go today. We're talking about today. And this is what the Cabinet Minister said, lots of colleagues are at the end of their tether. And he said he spoke to a senior member of a different leadership team, so a team that's clearly gearing up for this competition. Yes, that's the plan. They told me to tell him to go. He's got to go at Cabinet. So, of course, it seems to be that if Dan Hodges' reporting is correct, Cabinet today will be a round of time to go, Starmer.
Well, it's hard to think what else they could be discussing. Are they really going to talk about the Iran war? Are they really going to discuss the Prime Minister's plans for expanded breakfast clubs?
He'll try and keep bits with the agenda, won't he?
He'll try. He'll try his best. But that is surely what is going to be on everyone's minds. I mean, especially since the local elections, the message from the public could not have been clearer. These were the worst results for an incumbent government since John Major's Conservatives in 1995, and we all know what happened to them 2 years later to Tony Blair's landslide. Labour lost in Wales after a century of domination there. It failed to retake Scotland, letting the SNP in for a historic, I think, 4th or 5th consecutive term. So the message from the public is clear. There's growing discontent among MPs. As Charlie said earlier, it will probably reach 100 MPs calling for him to resign by the end of the day, if he hasn't gone already. And there are already members of the cabinet telling him to his face that he's got to go. Crucially, none have resigned. I think that is important to say. It's an important caveat that when you start to see cabinet resignations, that's when the Prime Minister's position becomes untenable. Because if you remember when Boris Johnson quit, it wasn't just that the Chancellor and the Health Secretary resigned, but also he was actually unable to fulfil the government because so many people were resigning. He simply couldn't fill all of the ministerial roles. That meant that his position became untenable. But, you know, the politics is only moving in one direction. There is no recovery for Keir Starmer from this, however long he wants to drag it out.
Do you think we could see cabinet resignations as early as this morning, if the meeting doesn't go as planned at 9:30? And it's often been said, hasn't it, that he that wields the knife never wears the crown. But actually, in terms of Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak resigned, didn't he? And then later went on to become Prime Minister. Could we see a similar thing happen today, potentially, with Wes Streeting?
Well, that is true. Rishi Sunak did go on to become Prime Minister, but we had to have the Liz Truss interregnum first.
Lest we forget.
And we are hearing, you know, the rumours are that many of the resignations have been triggered by Wes Streeting. He strenuously denies this, of course. So it does seem to be him that is wielding the knife most forcefully at the moment.
Very quiet, though, publicly.
That's true, and he hasn't resigned. He said to the Prime Minister that he has a plan for taking over, a plan for the leadership. But again, you know, who knows? The question is whether he's popular within the Labour Party. At the moment, the clear favourite is Andy Burnham, but he has the problem of actually getting into Parliament.
Have a seat.
No small hurdle.
He would get a
because
seat.
There are, as we saw in the local elections, there are now no safe Labour seats, even in Greater Manchester, which is extraordinary. Even where Andy Burnham used to have his seat when he was in Westminster in Lee, that part of Manchester has now gone fully to reform. He could quit the mayoralty. He could not get into Parliament via a by-election. They could then lose the Greater Manchester mayoralty to Reform or to the Green Party. There is so much that there's so much chaos and excitement to come.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Again, I'm going deeper and deeper into Dan Hodges' column here. He has also said that another campaign chief, so there's obviously multiple campaigns gearing up at this point in time, has told of another leadership contender, said basically what's happening is the PLP, which is the Parliamentary Labour Party, have launched a no-confidence motion in Keir Starmer. When they reach the magic number of 80 names, the figure required to launch a direct challenge, the Cabinet will tell him it's time to go. We are now at 79, and we expect that number will probably skyrocket in the next few hours. Is it likely then, if that happens before the Cabinet meeting goes ahead, that we could see that chorus of cabinet resignations if the PM doesn't go?
Well, the question is, do the cabinet have more political antenna than Keir Starmer does? And I think they probably do. Keir Starmer, I think, will want to stay on as long as possible. He is clearly not reading the room, getting the message. If he was going to turn things around, you would have thought that yesterday's speech would have been the chance to do that. Instead, I think it was one of his worst, even by his abysmal standards. It was wooden, it was tired, it was full of cliches, it had no new ideas. Everything that we'd heard before from, getting closer to the EU. Renationalising British Steel is not a bad idea, but everyone thought we'd already done it, so it won't have... Also subject to a public interest test, he added, just to remind us that he's a procedure-driven man.
Little asterisks in the speech. Subject to a subject... it was just so devoid of charisma. And again, we saw pictures of the auto cue in the room, and those clapping staffers who, of course, would be clapping because their job relies on it. It was something out of... I think I said this yesterday, and I don't want to be too disparaging about the I understand this is politics, but it was reminiscent of something you'd see in North Korea almost. Like, they were clapping at moments. The Prime Minister was even telling them to be quiet at one point so you could hear journalists in the room. I mean, it was absolutely beggars belief what happened in Downing Street.
But it was intentionally packed with loyalists, wasn't it?
Of course it was.
And journalists were getting booed for asking questions as well.
Yeah.
But this was the moment when Starmer...
Reform event.
Yeah, that's true, actually, yeah. This was the moment when Starmer was supposed to be fighting for his political life, but he was throwing punches with the force of an 8-year-old schoolgirl. It was an absolutely pathetic display, and I think it will have sealed his fate among the Labour MPs who aren't part of the faithful.
OK, well, let's bring in Charlie Rowley, who's been listening across to that analysis from Fraser Myers. What do you make of what you've heard?
Well, and living in fear of an 8-year-old schoolgirl. Look, there's the human element in it at the end of the day, and if the Prime Minister feels that he's under so much pressure, and he's obviously got his family to consider, and you wake up every morning and you see those headlines day after day, and you feel it's not going to go anywhere. And the game is up for the Prime Minister anyway.
Yes.
Whether it's this week, next week, 6 months' time, he's not going to lead the Labour Party into the next general election. He can't. You know, the voters gave a resounding rejection of the Labour government that he has led for almost 2 years. It's over.
It's a matter for you, so it's a matter of when, not if.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And when is that when for you, Charlie?
It would be... well...
What would you need to see?
It would be fitting of this Labour government if he did actually go today, because he's got a King's speech tomorrow that he wouldn't.
Well, stop him giving more speeches.
That he wouldn't end up being able to deliver on.
But they just can't stomach another speech. You know?
but that's the politics of this Prime Minister. You know, completely, unattached, late to the party, just doesn't get it. But I would, if I was Keir Starmer, I mean, if he wants to remain in number 10, I mean, he should basically just get my number from the GB News hotline and, I'd secure him there. Hunker down. You've got the King's speech tomorrow. This is your government's programme. If then that is a disaster, and we don't know I think there could be some good things in there. You never know. But that is the moment that should be the reset. It didn't come yesterday, but...
But that was the moment yesterday. He had to meet the moment yesterday, and he failed.
You're absolutely right, but this is Keir Starmer we're talking about, who doesn't do politics, and he does process. And so when we're talking about the process of the government's legislative agenda, that will be tomorrow. That's the King's speech. That's the formalities when the King will reopen Parliament and deliver a set of bills that the government wants to deliver on. But also when we talk about the process, we're talking about a few cabinet ministers, and I don't say this lightly, it's significant, but cabinet ministers going in to say, you've got to set a timetable. That's very different to saying, right, Prime Minister, you've got to go today.
No, I think you're... By the way, I think you're right about that. I don't think we're going to see Keir Starmer leave Downing Street today in the back of a van or in the back of a car. I think you're going to see... I didn't mean it that way. I meant in the back of a moving van. Just to clarify, I don't think they're going to pick him up and chuck him into a van. I meant a moving van.
The most exciting thing he would have ever done.
That would be the most exciting thing on Downing Street for a very long time. What I think is going to happen is that... And this is what many journalists reporting said. I'll put this to you as well, further onto Dan Hodges' column here, because he has been relatively accurate so far in his calling of what's going on here. He said that the Parliamentary Labour Party are ploughing the road at the moment. The ministers will begin to step down if the Cabinet do not move. Then they will move, he says, once the road is ploughed enough, and that he will be asked to set out a timetable, basically deliver a speech to say, I hear you, I'm going, but I'm going to be a caretaker while a new leader is positioned.
And I don't disagree with that if that's what actually happens. I just can't, at the minute, see that happening. So you're a junior minister in the Department of Culture, Media, Sport, or Department of Work and Pensions. Not the most sexiest of ministerial roles that might be out there. You decide to resign. OK, you get headlines for... It might start something, but you can replace those people. He's got 400... backbenchers. And as to Fraser's point earlier on, Boris wasn't able to fill those roles. He only had an 80-seat majority. Well, Keir Starmer's got a hell of a lot more than that. So he can replace people if those people are willing to do their jobs. But again, it's the optics of, at the end of the day, he's not going to be able to continue. But it's just a question of...
That's the calculation that those people who would call to say, hey, would you like to be Defence Secretary, backbench MP no one's ever heard of, that for them would also be a ridiculous thing to do, because, of course, why would they go and support a Prime Minister that is going to be out on his backside in the next 6 months or so, and they would also look so very silly for joining him and be relegated to the back ends of politics?
Well, I don't know. You do it for the title, you do it for the money, you do it for the prestige, and you do it for having a ministerial profile, which actually the next leader could probably say, OK, they did quite a good job and I'll keep you in government. So it's not a losing situation necessarily for them. But it just seems to me so bizarre if the Prime Minister comes out today to say, I'm announcing a timetable of my departure, all the while tomorrow we're expecting the King, who is the head of state, to go and deliver a message to the country of the programme of what this government should be doing
extraordinary,
when
isn't it?
the Prime Minister has just announced that he's going to step down. It doesn't make sense.
No. Well, Charlie and Fraser, just before we let you go, I wanted to show you the most extraordinary photograph because some very clever person has gone through Sir Keir Starmer's X page. You cannot make this up. If you are listening on the radio, this photograph was posted by Sir Keir Starmer on May the 13th, 2015. Taking our seats for the first time, would you believe he is sat next to Catherine West, our stalking horse candidate, and a certain Wes Streeting.
Were the knives in his back then, do you think, or were they sharpening and ready to go? I mean, it is extraordinary. And I think one of the things that characterises this reign of the Prime Minister, I'm pretty much, this is an obituary at this point in time because it's dying days, isn't it, is its social media profile. We have seen so many tweets going, I think one of the phrases used most, there's always a tweet for this government, Fraser.
There's always a tweet.
Absolutely.
If only Sir Keir Starmer of 2015 could see into the future. And those two potentially could be the start of his downfall.
Catherine West has actually triggered the downfall of every single Prime Minister since David Cameron in some way or another. Is that right, Fraser? There's someone saying that she was one of the people who first started lobbying at the time. I'll try and bring up that information for you in a little bit if people aren't aware of it. But I saw some reliable people writing Catherine West's sort of political kills, so to speak. So perhaps she's...
Political assassin.
Yeah, maybe she's the dark horse in all this. Maybe she will be party leader.
Maybe she's our next Prime Minister in waiting.
Yeah,
that would be quite a twist.
I think one thing is clear, Fraser, anything could happen. Quite clearly. Thank you very much, you two, Fraser Myers and Charlie Rowley. Really good to see you both this morning.
All right, let's speak now to former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, who's still been waiting very patiently for us. Paul, quite a morning, isn't it, ahead? The Cabinet will be, I'm sure, up very early today, if they've slept at all, frankly, given the chaos that's going on. We're hearing lots of journalists reporting, including Dan Hodges this morning in his piece in the Mail, saying that the Parliamentary Labour Party is essentially waiting for that that last name, or the last two names, before the Cabinet decide enough is enough and tell the Prime Minister to go later on this morning. What do you expect will happen?
Well, this 80 figure is a bit of a myth, isn't it? Because it doesn't actually trigger anything. It's a sign that there are 80 people who don't like the current situation. But I'm going to gently point out that means there are over 300 Labour MPs who haven't signed a letter, who are actually just getting on with their day jobs. And many of those on the WhatsApp groups are calling for calm and, being rather angry with their colleagues for going public. So there is another side to it. Cabinet this morning, I mean, I suspect what you'll see is some sort of show of loyalty. This is the optics of the political situation. Behind the scenes, there's all this furious WhatsApping going on, but in public, I suspect there'll be a show of strength. I don't anticipate any cabinet-level resignations ahead of the King's speech. So I think this may be a bit of a damp squib. And then the King's speech. And, if somebody becomes a new Labour leader, whoever that might be at some point in the future, they're going to inherit all the same problems that Keir Starmer's government faces in terms of growth and the international situation. So the King's speech tomorrow is going to be vital in terms of setting out how we're going to fix the problems. That's really what the country needs to know. I mean, I know we all love the game show and the sort of revolving door and all that, but it's not fixing the problems. And I am concerned, and I've been saying to colleagues that the public do not like this idea that you swap a leader and somehow everything's going to be all right if the underlying fundamentals are not being fixed.
Paul, I guess the question really is changing leaders seems inevitable at this point, frankly. I mean, I think we have to get real about the situation the Prime Minister's in, whether I'm sure you will disagree with me, but whether you like it or not, the appetite of the public is that the Prime Minister's got to go. You've got top cabinet ministers whose own back gardens, Tameside, Wigan, where of course the Culture Secretary is, Angela Rayner, the Red Wall gone, Wales gone. The Prime Minister hasn't got any more runway, so it's going to happen now. It's a matter of if, not when, I think is a well-established fact. We've got multiple leadership campaigns brewing in the background as far as we can tell here. I guess the question is, Paul, once the Prime Minister does go, who is better for you? Is it Wes or is it Angela?
Well, my argument for the last 35 years is that when the Labour Party veers off to the left, we lose support from the public, because that's not where the public is. Most people are sort of broadly moderate centrist folk who want a government that's on their side and isn't some sort of, a bunch of weirdos on the extremes. That's why I opposed Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party. So, a veer to the left is not the answer. And you made the important point that there are different government camps. There are camps around candidates who want to do things in a different way, but there isn't a single obvious person. So at some point in the future, who knows when, if there is a new Labour Prime Minister, I think there should be somebody who pursues a centrist course, because that is the way.
So you're backing Wes Streeting then, would you?
Well, I'm not backing anyone because there isn't a vacancy.
He'd be your centrist candidate, though, wouldn't he? I mean, he's made no secret of the fact he holds leadership ambitions.
Well, it's certainly not a secret after the last 48 hours, is it? As he seems to be mounting a coup. But I mean,
well, he's been quiet publicly.
Yes. Well, he's a very deft and skillful politician, isn't he, Wes? I mean, he's... I love that photograph, by the way. Don't they all look young?
Extraordinary, isn't it? Absolutely extraordinary, that image.
What politics does to your face. I mean, honestly, they look very young and fresh-faced. But, he is a class act, Wes, and I've known him for a long time. But there are other people in the wings, too, and there's names that viewers may not know, like Al Cairns, and certainly people like Shabana Mahmood, who are contenders, at some theoretical point in the future. We are lucky to be blessed by so much talent. However, right now, I just think it's time to hunker down. And I think the Prime Minister has not given any great indications, has he, that he wants to go. He's in fact done the opposite. And constitutionally, he can stay as long as he wants.
What would your advice be, as a former Labour Special Advisor, what would your advice to the Prime Minister be this morning before this Cabinet meeting? How should he play this? What should he be saying to his Cabinet?
Well, I think he just needs to instill a sense of confidence in them, and to show that there is a Labour government fizzing with ideas of how to fix things. If there is a sense that we've just run out of steam, then his situation will be much worse by lunchtime. But if there's a sense of forward momentum and movement, we're going to start doing things that really fix the fundamentals. I mean, it all rests on growth. Unless there's going to be growth in the economy, then the rest of this prospectus fails. So, things that show that there are ideas beating at the heart of a government that's, ambitious and really wants and restless and fizzing with ideas. And I think that will calm what he describes as his doubters, which is a great euphemism, isn't it? And give people a bit of confidence. But, I think it's a bit unfair to judge the speech yesterday, by the way, as being a sort of the Great Reset, because, of course, he couldn't announce huge amounts of policies in that speech ahead of the King's speech on Wednesday. He did give us a little trail of the nationalisation of whatever is left of the steel industry, which is a little taster. But I would hope to see just a series of bills that really are addressing the nation's needs. And, that's when people will not go off to the extremes. If they think there is a government that is on their side and getting on with it, they're not going to be quite so attracted by people like Zach Polanski. So, that's his mission. That's what he has to achieve. And the government ultimately judged on deeds, not words.
All right, Paul, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll hopefully hear from you again very shortly. But good luck today for your Prime Minister, indeed. I think he's going to need it. There is so much happening now. We're hearing government ministers are not confident about the Prime Minister's role, but some are saying they don't know what he's thinking. Some are saying we can't actually guarantee he's going to be in his role past today. It's a completely evolving situation. We're going to bring you some clips very shortly of how that's going this morning for some of those top government cabinet ministers. Doesn't look very good for the PM, I will say that so far.
And the cabinet meeting in just 2 hours' time. Is it going to be endgame for the Prime Minister?
Indeed. Sir Keir Starmer could be forced to step down in a few hours' time as he faces that cabinet showdown over his future.
The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is among 3 reported cabinet members urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign, with 79 Labour MPs now joining the growing mutiny.
And that's not all. 6 ministerial aides have quit as ministers and are expected to warn the Prime Minister his position is untenable.
Well, it follows Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling onto his premiership following Labour's disastrous local election results last week. So just how well will these comments age?
All right, joining us now is GB News' chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster, outside the door of Downing Street. Catherine, we are going to see ministers, cabinet ministers, pouring into that famous black door very shortly. We're hearing, of course, speculation is looming now that they will ask the Prime Minister to step aside. Could we see a potential caretaker Prime Minister speech outside the number 10 Downing Street today?
I think anything is possible, and welcome to Downing Street, where the Prime Minister is hanging on to his job by the thinnest of threads. But it feels very much this morning like that thread is about to break, because there is a civil war now going on in the Labour Party. Nearly 80 MPs calling publicly for him to go. Junior government aides resigning. Now, they've been replaced at the moment, but big splits in the cabinet, and we know that some have told him that it is time to set out a timetable for his departure. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, we understand, did that last night. And what I think is a very significant comment this morning from Darren Jones, who is the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, on the morning round. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to speak to GB News, but he has said on other outlets that the Prime Minister is, quote, listening to colleagues and he is talking to colleagues. He then says, I can't get ahead of any decision he might make. Now, this is one of the people closest to the Prime Minister. He was brought in to try to help with everything going on in number 10. There's been so much churn just a few months ago, seen as a very strong performer, and even he is leaving the door open to the Prime Minister, possibly announcing that he is going to step down, set out a timetable for when that might be, as early as today. So all eyes now on the cabinet. I have been speaking in the last half hour or so to one of Wes Streeting's key allies. Wes Streeting has been very, very quiet, though one of his aides resigned last night, and some are very cross with Wes Streeting, think that his fingerprints are all over this. That was flatly denied by his ally, who said Wes has not asked anyone to go over the top. Wes hasn't spoken to the Prime Minister in the last few days, but that Wes Streeting has at least been honest with the Prime Minister in that he told him some time ago that he would not be the first to move against him, but if it became clear that the Prime Minister's position was untenable, and it seems that's happening, that he would be ready to run for the leadership. He is in pole position. Angela Rayner, her tax affair is still unresolved. She owes £40,000, we're told, in stamp duty on a flat in Hove. Andy Burnham, who many people think is their best bet, given he's the most popular Labour politician in the country, but he's Mayor of Greater Manchester. He doesn't have a seat, so this might run away too fast for people that would want him back. And even if an MP stood down to force a by-election, is there any guarantee that there is such a thing as any safe Labour seat in the country? Now, a cabinet minister told me very recently that was the plan, but at the moment all bets are off. We simply do not know what happens next.
Anything could happen, Catherine. Thank you so much. We'll see you in half an hour's time.
We're now live with Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator, James Heal. James, good morning to you. It does look like anything could happen at this point in time. Government ministers seemingly doing the rounds this morning. Can't really give any indication what the Prime Minister's thinking, where he's going to go. They are not confident in him staying or leaving. I think they are seemingly just as confused as the rest of us in Britain. James, what's your analysis of what might happen today?
Well, firstly, Alex, what a perfect political epitaph for the premiership of Keir Starmer. I mean, we're here less than 2 years after that big election victory in 2024, and already he's looking like he's going to become the shortest-serving Labour Prime Minister. He's got the Cabinet at 9:30. We've already heard reports that about 4 of them have called him to go privately, and I suspect that we're now seeing a ratcheting up of the government ranks. We've already had the junior aides, we've had the backbenchers. I suspect we will get junior ministers resigning if nothing happens later today, but I suspect that the cabinet meeting at 9:30 will be one of those rare cabinet meetings that occurs every 5 years or so, a crunch occasion at which it's clear that all the tensions that have been boiling up in the Labour Party will be laid out in the open. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult for the Keir Starmer to get through today without actually saying, I will be leaving in a certain amount of months' time, and I will be leaving as Prime Minister.
James, it's quite stark, isn't it, how we're not hearing ministers and secretaries of state saying resign. We're hearing them say set out an orderly timetable or an orderly transition of power. Is that possible? And if so, what would that look like? Because the only person who seems to be ready and in pole position is Wes Streeting.
Yeah, so I think there is a degree of code when you're listening to these Labour MPs. Those calling for a more rapid transition are those tend to be favourable to Wes Streeting, who recognise that his chance is now or never. Those who want a more orderly transition are asking for more time. That's around 6 to 12 months. That would allow Andy Burnham to get a seat, to get back into Parliament. And I think that's why it's been quite striking over the past 72, 96 hours or so, Miriam, that actually what we're seeing is people... initially, it was the soft left calling for Keir Starmer to go. Then they realised that actually that would help Wes Streeting. And as a result of that, there was a sort of hosing down rearguard effect on Sunday. It's clearly got out of control. I think the tanks have gone out of the barracks, and now it seems that he is going to have to go. So I think that everyone is going to have to fight over what that timeline looks like. I suspect there'll be some sort of effective compromise, which is the Streetingites and the Burnhamites will just want him to go, doesn't matter when, and then they'll see let the best man win. But all these rules, and to go to your question, are very much up in the air. Obviously, you need 81 names behind one candidate to get rid of the Prime Minister. Currently, the sort of 80 or so people who've called for him to go are all different wings of the party. I think it's just the sort of effect of political reality. You remember back to Boris Johnson in 2022, everyone said he was safe after that confidence vote, that he couldn't be challenged. Turns out that was complete nonsense. These rules are rules until they're no longer rules. The one salient thing is political reality, and it's clear that the Prime Minister has lost the dressing room today.
But surely, if we were to wait for Andy Burnham to perhaps win, perhaps not win a by-election, the country can't be expected to be in limbo for 6 months. We're already talking about Sir Keir Starmer being a lame duck Prime Minister. He'd be a dead duck.
Well, I remember 2022, it was Operation Save Big Dog. This is very much Operation Save Dead Dog, isn't it? I mean, I think that we've had transitions in the past before. They tend to suit the Labour system more than the Tory one, which is more regicidal. You think back to Tony Blair in 2006, where he announced his timeline and he would took about a year or so to go. You can argue the country shouldn't have this system, but we do. And I think it would be in keeping with constitutional history if Keir Starmer stayed on for a few more months to allow an orderly transition. Ultimately, there are only 3 or 4 names which are doing the rounds, and one of them is Andy Burnham. And I think that you're already seeing briefings from the so-called soft left who suggest that, say, anyone like Wes Streeting wouldn't have legitimacy unless he challenged Andy Burnham. I think the Labour Party wants a proper contest. I think in some quarters there's a recognition that they haven't had sufficient intellectual challenge to what this government's been doing, and they need to lay it all out because they need to work out if they're going to fight that sort of reform threat, those hero voters, that element 2024, or has the game changed and they need to go after the progressives, the sort of the new green rise that's been surging across the country in recent months. So lots of big questions for the Labour Party, but one thing looks clear: Keir Starmer will never fight another general election.
James, let me put this to you. Dan Hodges, a journalist who's been, making quite a lot of bold statements on X about the state of play here. His analysis by speaking to what he seems to claim was multiple senior leadership contenders or allies of these contenders, which we obviously don't know who they all are, apart from perhaps Wes Streeting at this point in time, is saying this: the Parliamentary Labour Party are going out there and ploughing the road at the moment. Then ministers will step down, and finally the cabinet will move. He claims that the magic number is 80 names, which they expect will happen before the cabinet today, in which time the cabinet will turn on the Prime Minister. Are we expecting to see that take place in what's just under 2 hours' time?
I think very much the gist of that is correct. I don't think anyone can say the precise exact choreography, but I do think that is broadly correct. We've been running a list, Alex, on the Spectator website. We're up to, I think, 77 names this morning, and it's only 20 to 8. Not sure many of them will have their breakfast yet, but I think that a couple more names will certainly come out, and by that point you then have the symbolically important 80, 81. And then you do think you'll have some people maybe quitting. All I would say is I wish that this cabinet meeting was live streamed. I think they could probably help clear the national debt if they did, because I mean it's going to be an absolute box office. And I spoke to one special advisor last night who said it's probably one of the few cabinet meetings ever worth leaking.
Worth leaking, yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall? James Heal, thank you so much for your analysis. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at some of the newspaper front pages, shall we, and see the bloodbath for ourselves.
Well, the Mirror leads on reports that rebel MPs have turned on the Prime Minister, with nearly 80 MPs publicly demanding his resignation.
Meanwhile, The Independent looks towards a potential leadership bid from Health Secretary Wes Streeting, despite the Prime Minister vowing to fight on as of yesterday.
Will they be famous last words? The Daily Express says the PM is on the edge of an avalanche as MPs coordinate a mission to get Starmer out of number 10.
And The Guardian goes with this: Starmer's survival on the line as cabinet ministers urge him to quit. And finally, the Metro's headline focuses on the Prime Minister's announcement that British Steel will be nationalised. That was in that crucial speech yesterday, but it didn't seem to be quite enough, did it, to quell the storm of MPs that are demanding Starmer's notice period. All right, well, we've got two gentlemen here to give their views on everything happening today. And it's not just, I mean, if there was any other news, we'd be doing a normal paper round. Sebastian Salek here and, of course, Christo Foufas. But today there is only one story in Britain
you
that matters.
You don't want to discuss that Greggs are opening in Tenerife. Because I think that is the story of the day.
Well, perhaps that's where the PM might go and get a bit of respite when he's decided
he
enough
might
is
need
enough.
it.
He probably will need it. I certainly would. I mean, he's still human at the end of the day, isn't he? Despite whether or not you like him politically. Look, Starmer on the brink, Christo. This is the front page of the Daily Mail here. As cabinet ministers tell him it's time to go, and the ministers we've heard about so far that we with some confidence: Shabana Mahmood, John Healey, Yvette Cooper. These are what I would call Starmer loyalists. These are people, particularly Shabana Mahmood, who will not have potentially a safe cabinet seat if the left get their way. So this is quite seismic, if true.
Well, it means that they're seeing the bigger picture of their jobs as MPs being more important than perhaps their cabinet position. But also, you're absolutely right. I mean, the fact that they are in the cabinet and apparently it's reportedly breaking ranks, that is absolutely huge. Can I just take a step back for a second, though? Because I just think that we should maybe take a moment to talk about quite how huge this is. This is a Prime Minister. There are so many elements about this that are what you would call unprecedented, and that's a word that's overused. But this is a man that under 2 years ago got 400 MPs in the House of Commons, won an absolute landslide. It might have been a loveless landslide. It might not have been a huge share of the vote, but the number of seats was absolutely huge. And the fact that in under 2 years he's in a position now where it is very, very credible to think that within the next 48 hours he may no longer be serving, in the future as Prime Minister. Not only that, but that actually out of that 400 MPs, there is no one that is good enough that you could say is the surefire person, that they're actually having to look outside of the House of Commons to someone who's mayor of Greater Manchester, because the pick in the Commons is so just mediocre, the sea of mediocrity. And perhaps perhaps if we hadn't had this complete sea of mediocrity for the last 2 years, and there had been some sort of ideology or strategy, whether you agree with it or not, he wouldn't be in this position at all.
But ideology is an issue, isn't it, Sebastian? Let's bring you in at this point, because in 2024, the Labour Party was handed this huge majority, this huge opportunity, if you like, to create change, and change for the better. That's what we keep hearing, don't we? That is an opportunity that, if the Prime Minister goes today or this week or in the next 6 months, it has been wasted, hasn't it? At least with Boris Johnson, you may not like his politics, but he can sit here and say, we've got the fastest vaccine rollout in the world, you know, are steadfast on Ukraine and the rest. What could Sir Keir Starmer say about his legacy at this point? It's U-turns, isn't it?
No, I don't agree with that analysis, because he can say exactly the same on Ukraine. I don't think policy has been any different between Labour and the Conservatives. They've both done the right thing and doubled down. Boris Johnson was Prime Minister in a really weird time. He had the opportunity to deliver the vaccine. And what's remarkable, I think, to build on what Christo was saying, is that, yes, if Starmer goes, it will be stunning that he's gone from a majority to that. But the same thing happened to Boris Johnson. And I think it's more of a statement on our political environment than it is on any particular leader at this point. The question then becomes, how do you get out of that? How do you break out of this cycle of what I call Tinder politics? Every 2 or 3 years we get bored, we start swiping again, we think someone else has the answer. Look, I've not made my mind up on who I think the next Prime Minister should be, so I don't want to talk ill of anyone. But I do think we need to ask ourselves why we are so thrilled about the prospect of Andy Burnham. And I think part of the reason is that he is untarred by Westminster politics. He's been out of the game so long that he looks more attractive as a result. Now, look, it may be that he does have the answers and he will be fantastic, but we have to factor that in as well.
I'll put this to you, Christo. We're hearing Darren Jones, quite a senior cabinet minister this morning, is doing some government rounds. Reacting to this, top journalists are saying that this indicates that what he's saying, and I'll put the quote to you, that Sir Keir Starmer may be announced to announce the timetable for his resignation. Here's what they're saying. Darren Jones has said to a broadcaster, he's listening to colleagues, he's talking to colleagues. I can't say what decision he may or may not take. I'm not going to get ahead of the Prime Minister's decision. It seems to me that he can't confidently say that the Prime Minister's going to stay steadfast in his role. This is genuinely astounding.
It's not an outright denial, is it? It's not an absolutely...
Which is what the Cabinet would do if they were rallying around him.
It's not a staunch defence, is it?
And it's what Starmer did yesterday. Remember, he was asked by journalists in the press conference afterwards, including GB News, and he was told, well, actually, he was saying, I will fight on, I will keep going. And so... is it that there is going to be a challenge and that he'll fight on? Is it going to be that he will, as you say, set out his timetable for standing down? I don't know why in my gut I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's too stubborn, and he's got
There's a man of process, isn't he?
And he's got this narrative in his head, the human rights lawyer, I'm doing the country a favour by not bringing chaos onto the country. I mean, it's the arrogance is unbelievable. Can I just take a moment to talk to you about what you were just talking about with Boris Johnson and Starmer as well, regarding Starmerism and Johnsonism. I think that Starmer and Johnson are actually quite similar, in as much as it's this reactive politics, events that we react to, rather than proactive ideological backbone that says, this is what we are doing, this is what we are ploughing ahead with. In fact, I think Starmer himself has said that he's pragmatic. He doesn't have any kind of Starmerist ideological thread through his policies. Well, actually, I think that one of the reasons that we've got this Tinder-type politics you described is because of that. And I know I bring up this name constantly all the time, but Thatcher, Blair, even Cameron to a point, you could describe in a couple of sentences what that ism is, what Blairism is, what Thatcherism was, what Cameronism was. I don't think you can do that with Johnsonism. You certainly can't do it with Starmerism. And actually, I think you need an ism. You do.
Well, Boris would say he got Brexit done.
But that's reactionary, I would say. That was the events that I mean, you're right. That is probably the thing he got most over the line. But anything else, you know, this levelling up didn't really happen. Vaccine, reactive. Ukraine, reactive. What was his big idea? And
his
just
ideology.
Just to say, yesterday we heard so many words from Starmer that would imply some sort of ideology. Yesterday, we need a big idea. We need a big change. People need to feel it now. OK, well, what is that idea then? Nothing.
On your point of Starmerism, Johnsonism, Rishi Sunakism, whatever you want to call it, is it not the case, perhaps? So Liz Truss tried to have an ism, Trussism, which was a low-tax sort of Britain on Singapore on Thames sort of style country, and it backfired dramatically. Is it the case that the country is no longer able to take on any risk, and therefore any radical prime minister coming in, and as we're seeing today with the markets, they're going to absolutely hate what's going on here. We're going to see the gilt yield spike even higher than it's been. They do not like anything that is not consistency Blairism.
I do think it's time for risk, and I think there's appetite among the voter base. I mean, look at the flocking towards reform and to the Greens. These are two parties that, love them or hate them, are willing to take risks. I think Krista makes a really good point, and it speaks to what I think is one of the biggest problems with politics at the moment, and it's a lack of, and I'm going to try and say this word properly, specificity. There we go, got there. Because pick up any leaflet from any party that we've all had ploughed through our doors during the local elections, and you will see platitudes, you will see bromidic language, you will see all of this political fluff that doesn't really mean anything. And it's so devoid of hard policy. And the problem is now we're going to get swept away by personalities, we're going to get swept away by charisma, we're going to get swept away by ideology. But what we aren't going to see is any real solution to fix this problem.
Even their manifesto reflected that. Labour's last manifesto.
They all did.
This mediocre,
all manifestos did.
Just absolute nothingness. This just, and then you complain. Obviously, one complains that everything that they were doing weren't in it because they were playing it so safe. And I think that the public is absolutely desperate. I mean, one of you're right, Polanski, Farage, you might loathe them, you might love them, but my word, I know what they stand for. I know where they're coming from.
Do you, though? Or are they just governing with or campaigning with stronger vibes? I still don't think I can pin them down on policies.
I think that you could absolutely say that Farage is a small state, low immigration, low tax a politician. I think that.
Yes, but this is the problem. What does that translate into in terms of policies?
His policies. And actually, I think that on your point,
but those aren't policies; those are ideologies.
Well, no, low tax is a policy.
No.
Taxes is a policy.
Low tax is an ideology. Which taxes do you then cut? That's the policy.
Well,
and that's the level of detail we're not getting to.
OK, that's fair. But if we go to Liz Truss and your point on that, I think it's such a shame for Britain, I think, that the ideology, Liz Truss's destination, I think, was absolutely sound. You should have more money in your pocket that you keep, and we try and go for growth. It was the process that was the problem, and because of the fact that it went so wrong, actually the destination is now seen as the problem. People say, well, you can't possibly have a low-tax, high-growth society because Liz Truss tried it and failed. No, she didn't get to try it because the means by which she was trying wasn't credible, unfortunately.
Well, that's the question, is it? Well, some would argue it was credible. She was the Prime Minister, and therefore what she said goes. However, the Bank of England didn't like it. Many other quangos didn't like it, and therefore that change in the markets brought her down. So my point is, if you want to be radical, and this is what we're hearing Labour Party politicians advocate for, a radical Prime Minister, well, you're going to be out on your backside the same way Liz Truss was.
Because I think that, unfortunately, it is both policy and politics. Liz Truss played policy brilliantly. She didn't play the politics. Again, if you're going to be radical, fine, be radical, but radical's got to be the destination, and you've got to get there via certain means. You can't be radical within a month, which is what I think Liz Truss was.
But you can be radical and balance the books. And what the market was so worried about was that the books under Truss were not going to be balanced. And these are non-political people. These are people acting in the interests of their own finances. So we can look on them with a certain level of neutrality.
But that doesn't mean that the destination itself is wrong. It was the speed and means by which.
But then once again, it comes back to policy. If you're going to cut taxes, how are you going to pay for it? And I just haven't seen anyone put forward a platform that answers that question.
Sebastian, let's go back to Darren Jones's comment, shall we? This is the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. He is doing the media rounds this morning, but unfortunately he didn't have time to speak to GB News. He has been saying this morning that the Prime Minister is listening to his colleagues. He can't say what decision he may or may not take. But he's implying there that the Prime Minister has to make a decision. Now, that's different to what Number 10 was saying last night, which is that Starmer is going to resist any pressure. Darren Jones is as loyal as they come. He's been put out by Number 10 on the broadcast round this morning. What does that tell you about what's coming?
Yeah, I think we can reliably read that as a shift in position. The question for Starmer is, what does this look like? You're going to be naturally, as a Prime Minister, thinking about your legacy, and you're going to want to take this very carefully. And also, this is a man who, and viewers may disagree with me, genuinely, I think, cares about this country and will want to do it in an orderly way that doesn't put anybody at risk. So I imagine the conversation in number 10 today is, OK, this is probably over. How do we do it in an orderly way that protects our reputations but also looks after the needs of the country at a very, very febrile time?
What's the orderly way? Would that be waiting for Andy Burnham? Would that be a six-month contest?
I genuinely don't know. I think there's probably an argument to get it done before conference and get somebody in and move on, because the longer you leave it, the more stasis you have.
I know we're talking a lot about Burnham, we're talking a lot about Rayner, we're talking a lot about all these people, Christo. Very briefly, do you think it's likely that we can actually see a wider slate of candidates than we possibly thought before? Because I think there's an appetite for so much change that perhaps these current lot that are being floated as candidates might not even win it.
But the problem still remains, and that's why I'm cynical about Starmer going, is that the people who are the backbenchers, who couldn't even vote through the most basic of benefit cuts, they're going to go for the most radical left because they think that is the answer to everything. And I really worry about the country.
Just to leave it on that note, this is what happened with Jeremy Corbyn. People forget, nobody ever anticipated Jeremy Corbyn would become leader of the Labour Party. It was a running joke. And before you knew it, Jeremy Corbyn was leading the Labour Party into 2 elections.
OK, Christo, Sebastian, thank you very much. We'll see you in 45 minutes' time. Do stay with us. The Prime Minister's day of reckoning has come, the most crucial cabinet meeting ever, taking place at 9:30 this morning. For now, here's your weather.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's weather update time from the Met Office here on GB News. A chilly start out there for many of us today. There's quite a few showers around across Scotland and they'll be spreading south. So it's a mixture of sun and showers really through the day. A bright start in the south, but it is quite cold. Temperatures only slowly rising. A chill in the breeze as well, which is coming in from the northwest, pushing this band of showery rain across northern England into Wales and across the Midlands. A mixture of sunshine and showers will follow, but the showers tending to fade from central Scotland and Northern Ireland this afternoon. So some good spells of sunshine here, but temperatures struggling only really in the low to maybe mid-teens across the south, but clouding over here through the course of the afternoon. Still a few showers to come across eastern England into this evening time. Not too many in the southwest, so generally here we'll see some fine weather to end the day, as we will across Wales. But again, quite quickly those temperatures dropping away. That chilly air coming in from the northwest, and also by this evening more showers packing in across western Scotland with, yes, a little bit of snow over the tops of the mountains, but some sunny spells across eastern Scotland. As we go through the evening, we'll see more of these showers tending to drift south, so returning to northern England as we go through the evening. More widespread across Northern Ireland also, and eventually some cropping up across North Wales. Much of the south, though, becoming dry, lengthy clear spells here. Not quite as cold as last night because there's more cloud around and more breeze, but there could still easily be some pockets of frost here and there. Most towns and cities dropping to about 5 to 7 Celsius. But a chilly feel on Wednesday, and more showers to come, I suspect, tomorrow as well. Maybe again dry, sunny start across the southeast, but generally expect showers tomorrow. And tomorrow's showers likely to be pretty heavy. Hail and thunder mixed in for good measure also. And again, with the winds coming in from the north or northwest, that is going to bring a chilly feel, despite some sunny spells between the showers. Temperatures below average, 10 to 14 Celsius. Goodbye.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning. The Prime Minister faces a mutinous cabinet meeting in less than 2 hours that could spell the end of his premiership.
Yes, as one of Keir Starmer's closest allies, Darren Jones, refuses to say whether or not he will stay or go.
With an avalanche of almost 80 MPs demanding that he resigns today.
Well, there are reports that even the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and perhaps even the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, have jumped on the bandwagon after Starmer's last-ditch attempt to rally the party fell flat.
The election results last week were tough, very tough. We lost some brilliant Labour representatives. That hurts, and it should hurt. I get it, I feel it, and I take responsibility.
And Sharena rubbed salt in the Prime Minister's wound, saying it was a mistake to block Andy Burnham from returning to Westminster.
Andy Burnham should never have been blocked. It was a mistake that the leadership of our party should put right.
So, with the Prime Minister on the brink and a meeting for the history books due to start at 9:30 a.m, is this the day Starmer accepts it's all over?
It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Alex Armstrong, and this is GB News Breakfast.
So Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, so he would be the Prime Minister's right-hand man, is out doing the media rounds this morning. Unfortunately, he does not have time to speak to GB News this morning. And it is a familiar story, isn't it, Alex, when it comes to some government ministers and secretaries who don't want to appear on GB News. And it does make you think, doesn't it? Perhaps if they had come on and spoken to people watching GB News, maybe their message would have been out there a lot more effectively if they'd been speaking to the country rather than just to the left of their party. As we saw with the Prime Minister yesterday, he wasn't speaking to the nation, was he?
No.
He wasn't speaking to the country, he was speaking to the left of his party.
And, you know, this news channel here doing exceptionally well. We are leading the election results here on GB News. We beat both BBC News Channel and Sky News.
For
We're
10
here
months now?
For 10 months in a row,
Yeah.
right? We are here. We are willing to talk to you. Your colleagues are constantly here on GB News. We speak to many of them, some of your good colleagues who do decide to come on GB News, and speak to our audience. Speak to the working class people of the country as well who do watch GB News in their droves. People in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England. And this is the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a party, a government that doesn't seem to want to listen. That saw that in the speech the other day by the Prime Minister, didn't we? It was all about the EU. Entire seats up and down the country, Ellie, where there were Brexit voters. Wales voted for Brexit. The Red Wall voted for Brexit, have gone Reform UK. A failure to listen, a failure to engage with those people. It almost feels like they turn their noses up at them and say, it doesn't matter what you think, we're going to focus in on ourselves. And I will say a warning, it didn't go very well for the Conservative Party when they looked inwards to themselves. And that is exactly what this government has unfortunately been doing, which is, I think, is the reason why they're in such a mess.
But many people would listen to that speech yesterday from Sir Keir Starmer and say, tone deaf.
Yeah.
When it comes to Wales, when it comes to the Red Wall, when it comes to Labour heartlands. Well, he wasn't speaking to those areas.
There's some good things in there. I think nationalising British Steel is so important. We should own those things. And this is the thing that the Prime Minister's missing. That's the conversation that our audience want to have. They want to see Britain reindustrialised. They want to see energy come back to Britain. Our audience, we know them very well here. Many of you may disagree, of course, but we know you want to have these conversations with top ministers. All right.
He failed to meet the moment,
he did,
didn't he? And now we're in a situation where it could be endgame for the Prime Minister.
And indeed, just on Darren Jones, of course, who was on the round doing the rounds this morning, but not here on GB News. We have seen that many commentators and journalists are saying he's just failed to support the Prime Minister in saying that he's not sure what decision he'll take, which is very different from what the Prime Minister said yesterday.
Yep.
There is a decision coming.
Yep.
That is the critical thing we have learned from this round so far. It is not set in stone that the Prime Minister is going to fight on.
Yeah, Sir Keir Starmer could be forced to step down in a few hours' time. He is facing a cabinet showdown over his future. That cabinet meeting at 9:30.
Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is among 3 reported cabinet members urging Keir Starmer to resign as Prime Minister, with now at least 79 Labour MPs joining the mutiny.
And there could be more before 9:30, couldn't there?
Indeed.
And that's not all, as 6 ministerial aides have quit, as ministers are expected to warn the Prime Minister today that his position is untenable.
Well, it follows to Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling onto his premiership following Labour's disastrous local election results. Just how well will these comments age from yesterday?
Well, let's go live to Westminster and speak to Shadow Transport Secretary Richard Holden. Very good morning to you, Mr. Holden. The Prime Minister is saying just yesterday, just under 24 hours ago now, that he's not going to quit, he's not going to plunge the country into chaos. How do you think those comments are going to age today?
Well, we'll have to see about that. I think the real question here, though, is that, I don't think it's really necessarily just about the driver. We could have any of a plethora of Labour MPs actually at the top of government. It's really about the direction of that government. I think one of the big things we've seen over the last few months, driven by Kemi Badenoch and the Conservative front bench in the House of Commons, has been all those U-turns which the government's had to perform. And that's because they've been heading in the wrong direction. And I don't see any of the Labour frontrunners saying, actually, the real big issue is we've been heading in the wrong direction, we need to do something different. Yet businesses I speak to on my high streets in Basildon and Billericay, or actually when I visit constituencies up and down the country, saying things like, the extra jobs tax is killing their ability to employ particularly young people, or those other issues like the winter fuel payment they tried to take away from pensioners, or issues around the grooming gangs which Kemi forced Keir Starmer to have a reverse position on here in Parliament. Those are issues which keep coming up again and again on the doorstep, and I don't think any of the Labour politicians who are up for potentially to become the Prime Minister really have a different approach to Keir Starmer on any of those key issues.
When Boris Johnson was in a similar position to the Prime Minister today, you didn't call for Boris to resign, from what I can recall. You understand the position that some Cabinet Ministers will be in today. What will be going through their minds as they make up the decision as to whether a Prime Minister should resign or not?
Well, I'm sure what's going through, I hope what's going through people's minds at any point like this is what's in the interest of the country. I fear what's going through the minds of many of those in the Cabinet today will be what's in my personal interest. And I think that's why we've seen the aides of certain ministers being the ones to try and resign. First of all, there's been a lot of speculation in the national media about that over the last 24, 48 hours. I think, how it positions versus Wes versus Andy versus Angela and all that sort of thing. I think what people want to see is a vision for the future of the country coming across clearly. I think we haven't seen that from this government. We've seen that real issue, I think, start around 18 months ago when they, one of those first big decisions that they had, and they had that big rebellion over whether or not to try and rein in welfare spending or not. I think a lot of the issues we're seeing is coming from that lack of grit and that lack of real fiscal responsibility around that decision on welfare, and that's playing all the way through into our borrowing costs, into actually the fact that the public finances are getting out of control. We as Conservatives needed to go back and start to think around Conservative principles and start our view of the future from those principles. That's why we've come out so strongly to get welfare under control, to keep borrowing under control, to have that reassessment of our position. That's why we've said we want to get out the ECHR, for example. I think Labour just aren't doing any of that. They're not really thinking about what are the fundamental issues facing the country. They're actually thinking about positioning, and that's what worries me at the moment about the game playing going on and the consequences that could have for our country.
For Sir Keir Starmer, is it over? Should he resign?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that, when you've lost the support of such a large portion of your party, there is a real question around leadership there, and that's a real... And that's where it comes to. The direction is the issue, but, obviously it's about the person driving that car as well, and driving the country in this instance. I think it's pretty clear that Keir Starmer has shown a total... inability to really understand where the country is, to understand the real big challenges facing the country as well. It's what happened to my party. They lost track of the big picture, lost track of those values which made us come into politics. We've started to re-establish that under Kemi. We've still got a long way to go. I think Labour are still on that downward loop there. They're not thinking about the good of the country, and I think that's what I would urge every Labour MP to do. Think about what's the direction of the direction the country needs to take, and also the policies to get us there, because that's what's most important at the moment.
Mr. Holden, the markets have just opened here in the UK and they are in free fall. The FTSE 100 is already down 1.1%. If the cabinets do not move against the Prime Minister, could we face a similar situation that was under a previous leader of yours, Liz Truss, where the markets essentially force him to go?
Well, as I said, the danger really is actually instability. And if Keir Starmer stays, I think the instability could be even greater than if he goes. Because the truth is that he's clearly lost control of his parliamentary party, which means on anything put forward in the King's speech, then actually his backbenchers could force his position, force him to change position anyway. I think that's the issue here. So that's why I keep saying yes, it's about the leadership, yes, it's about the driver, but it's also about the direction of travel. That's what we really need to see a change in, is somebody who understands that the country's been heading in the wrong direction under this Labour government, with more regulation, more borrowing, more welfare, and we've got to have somebody who gets that. I don't know if any of the Labour Party MPs there have even the slightest idea that that's what really needs to change, but I really hope for the good of the country that one of them does.
Talking about stability, there is a lot of talk, isn't there, from Labour MPs about an orderly timetable and an orderly transition of power, talking about Mr Burnham potentially winning a by-election, returning to Westminster and then being eligible for the party leadership. Do you think Andy Burnham could be Labour's answer?
I mean, Andy Burnham, is one of those people who's flipped around positions constantly. I think your listeners will be, and viewers will also remember he's, I think, the only health secretary to ever actually privatised an NHS hospitals, who was on the absolute radical Blairite wing back before 2010, and now he's obviously on that sort of more, as they would talk about this, within the factions of the Labour Party, the so-called soft left. I don't really know what Andy Burnham's positioning is and whether it would survive contact with reality of decisions made here in government. Look, it's not for me to just determine who within the Labour Party is the right person. As I said, for me, this is really about the principles and understanding the real conditions the country faces. Because, cost of living is absolutely hammering families out there. There's taxes and regulations being put on by the Labour government are hurting businesses on high streets up and down the country. Those are the things that I want to see addressed and focused on, and not the internal Labour machinations or how you, position yourself within the sort of woke strata to try and win votes in the Labour Party. Otherwise, we'll end up with a comedy figure like trying to fight Zach Polanski for those sorts of votes. I don't think that's what the country needs. I think the country needs clear leadership with clear principles, and I don't think we're seeing that at the moment from this crop of people, jostling for position.
OK, Richard Holden, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's the Shadow Minister there for the Conservative Party. We're now joined by GB News' chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster, live outside Downing Street. Catherine, the markets have opened into absolute free fall here in Britain. This is going to shake the country across, of course, one of our biggest industries, which is, our finance industry today. The Cabinet Ministers can't seemingly defend or say what the Prime Minister's going to do. Last night we heard he was sticking around. Today we're hearing from Darren Jones, a senior Cabinet Minister, that he's not sure what decision he's going to make. Well, we didn't know there was a decision to be made. Catherine.
Yes, welcome to Downing Street and an almighty mess. Less than 2 years after the Labour Party won a majority, promising to stop the chaos, stop the infighting that had seen the Conservatives cycle through Prime Minister after Prime Minister. And yet, after those disastrous election results, we've got nearly 80 Labour MPs calling for the Prime Minister to go. Some junior aides resigning, they've been replaced. But critically now, everything hangs on what the Cabinet does next. They will be arriving for the Cabinet meeting shortly. There is a massive wall of press here, and it feels like anything could happen. We know that last night the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood called on the Prime Minister to set out a timetable for his departure. We know too that the Foreign Secretary and David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, also had conversations. So did the Defence Secretary. We know that people like Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary, and Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, are urging the Prime Minister to stay put. And I was at that speech, it's not even 24 hours ago, where he said, I know I've got doubters, but I will prove them wrong. I'm not going anywhere, because to do so would be to plunge the country into chaos. Frankly, it feels like the chaos has already arrived. The Cabinet are supposed to be talking about policy, about the King's speech tomorrow. I arrived here at 5:30 in the morning. There were marching bands coming down alongside St James's Park, practicing for the King's speech. All the roads around Westminster are closed, and yet the King might tomorrow might lay out a legislative agenda that could be becoming obsolete if the pressure on the Prime Minister gets to a point where he feels that he has to go. Now, Darren Jones, one of his key allies, has told other media this morning that the Prime Minister is listening to colleagues and talking to colleagues. He said, I cannot get ahead of any decision that he might make. He says that the majority still want him to stay, but that majority, if it exists, is pretty quiet now. I have spoken to people inside Number 10, people in Labour more broadly, who are horrified by what's going on. Even, in fact, key allies of some of the people that might like the Prime Minister's job, saying that they feel very depressed because nobody knows where this ends. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has been very quiet. People on the Andy Burnham camp, Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the most popular Labour politician in the country, but one currently without a seat and so without a means back here and to the Prime Minister's job, pointing fingers at the Wes Streeting camp and saying that they are behind this, trying to accelerate this so Andy Burnham can't get back in. Now, I've spoken to one of Wes Streeting's key allies this morning. He says that's absolutely not true. Says that the Health Secretary hasn't asked anybody to go over the top for him, hasn't spoken to the Prime Minister for days, but also said, look, at least the Health Secretary has been honest, because he said to the Prime Minister, I'm not going to start a challenge with you, but if it becomes clear that your position is untenable, then I'm ready to run. He is in pole position, but the Parliamentary Labour Party will likely go for somebody on the left. So in the absence of Andy Burnham, who might that be? Angela Rayner, she's still mired in tax problems. She didn't pay £40,000 in stamp duty. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary. Nobody knows where this goes, but the Prime Minister's position is hanging by the thinnest of threads this morning, and it feels like at Cabinet or after Cabinet, that thread could break.
It could. Catherine, thank you so much.
Let's cross over now to political commentator Paul Connew. Paul, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Utter chaos here in Britain, as, of course, it seems that nobody knows what's going on in Downing Street. We're getting briefed and debriefed by lots of different cabinet ministers, lots of journalists some saying that there's going to be a decision made, some say the Prime Minister's going to fight on, some say there's going to be a leadership contest triggered. This is absolute chaos. This is worse than anything we'd seen from the Tories, who at least when they stabbed the knife in the back of the previous Prime Minister, one of them at least, they took him out almost immediately and started resigning. It seems to be that nobody has got the gall to go and resign from Cabinet yet.
If it wasn't such a serious issue for both the Labour Party and the country, this would be a classic edition of The Thick of It. A good source, a normally good source, tells me that Keir Starmer will be asking individually his cabinet colleagues today the question, should I go or should I stay? And if the majority answer is no, then he will set a timeline for his departure. But it's too close to call on that, I think. But we're heading into constitutional crisis territory. I mean, here we have the King's speech scheduled tomorrow, with a huge question mark on whether the Prime Minister will still be the Prime Minister. I mean, or a lame duck Prime Minister. It's quite extraordinary.
It truly is. You couldn't make it up, could you, in terms of the timing? The King's speech tomorrow, essentially setting out Labour's legislative agenda for a Prime Minister who may not even be here in 6 months' time.
Exactly, and the markets, the bond markets in particular, are moving in the wrong direction for us, which again only adds to the cost of living crisis. So I mean, we are in nightmare territory, and obviously, if the pressure to go mounts, then the issue then becomes, what's the timeline? Will it be soon, in which case that will certainly suit the Wes Streeting camp, or will it be longer, which is what obviously the Andy Burnham camp wants? So there is going to be a civil war to an extent, between the two sides on that. I mean, it is beyond satire.
Paul, let me put this to you. We've seen Keir Starmer, some of his closest allies, people who would frankly not get a job if there were a left-leaning new Prime Minister like Rayner, perchance, Shabana Mahmood. Who we know Rayner is not massively fond of her policies. We've seen Yvette Cooper, perhaps, I know there's conflicting reports about Yvette Cooper's stance on this, calling for the Prime Minister to go. John Healey, a man, Defence Secretary, of course, someone we don't hear massively seemingly being some sort of rebel, also calling for the Prime Minister, privately perhaps, to go. How bad is this when you've got your closest allies?
Well, when you look at this morning's papers, in fact, it's a common theme of a Prime Minister on the brink, and that's not just confined to the normal right-wing papers who will be relishing his crisis. It's also papers like The Mirror and The Guardian posing the same question. I mean, in my own column on election day, I posed the question, defiant Prime Minister or dead man walking? Well, up until yesterday, it looked like it was going to be the defiant Prime Minister, but I also argued that it was probably ultimately the dead man walking. And it certainly is that now. The only question is the timeline. It's not a question of if he goes, it's only when he goes, and then, of course, who replaces him.
Paul, it could be a very dramatic cabinet meeting in just over 1 hour's time. Potentially not the most significant cabinet in history. Of course, Thatcher resigned at cabinet, didn't she?
Yes, she did. And of course, the Labour system for replacing a Prime Minister is much more complex than the Tory one, and it's not simply a question of a vote of confidence. So the mechanics of it. And obviously, Shabana Mahmood's situation is quite interesting because she's probably the person that, if she put a hat in the ring, which I don't think she will because the left would never accept her, but she's probably the Labour leader that Reform and Nigel Farage would probably least like to see in situ. But the question for Keir Starmer is, does he now sack her, or does he ignore the fact that she basically publicly let it be known that she'd advised him to go?
Well, there are reports that she's in cahoots with Wes Streeting, and that's why she's gone publicly on this.
Yes, I've heard that too. But the trouble is, if Starmer were to sack her, it would look like he was dancing, to Angela Rayner's tune, which wouldn't be a good look either. Certainly, I think in the eyes of the general public. So, I mean, there are catch-22 questions come up whichever way you look at this.
And this is the thing, Paul, isn't it? He hasn't actually got the political capital to sack any of his cabinet at the moment. We saw before the local elections there was so many rumours, and normally when you hear so many rumours from different journalists from different political sides of the spectrum, there's going to be a cabinet reshuffle. It normally means that they're briefing that there will be a cabinet reshuffle to save, which was being pipped at the time to save the Prime Minister. We didn't get a cabinet reshuffle in the end. What we got was Gordon Brown being rolled out, which has been mocked and ridiculed, frankly, I think, by most of the media at least. That's how weak he is. He can't even reshuffle his cabinet at this point in time. That is not a man who is commanding the power of the cabinet as the first, technically the first most powerful minister of the bunch.
No, you're right there. I mean, I have a certain, although I've been writing for months now that Keir Starmer isn't the man to lead Labour into the next general election, I do have a little bit of sympathy for him, because a lot of the problems he's got are the result of international issues not in his control. But at the same time, he has made catastrophic errors, and U-turns, and not least the Mandelson situation, which some of his own supporters have dubbed Mandelstein as the misjudgment monster he helped create. But the trouble is, his biggest weakness, in a way, is his lack of communication skills. He's not an orator. He can't inspire. And he comes across with what he is, really. He's not a natural politician. He is a civil service lawyer, and that mindset, in fact, controls the way he actually acted as Prime Minister. And I think that reason alone, he has to go. But I think it has to be an orderly process. Maybe the ideal time to resolve this should coincide with the party's annual conference in Liverpool, which is at the very end of September.
Yes.
That would potentially give a time frame for Andy Burnham to find out whether he can find and win a safe seat and return to Parliament.
It seems, Paul, that we won't get the Prime Minister leaving Downing Street, and I think that would be quite something, but perhaps we will hear him lay out his timetable, which is what we're hearing speculated that the Cabinet will force his hand to do.
That's the likeliest scenario that I hear. Yes.
I think that's the most likely scenario. If anything at all happens today, it will be that. Paul Connell, thank you so much for joining us this morning to talk about this very developing story.
But of course, that could lead to a summer of instability, couldn't it? We've seen the markets already down this morning. FTSE 100 down 1%, you said?
Yeah.
1.1%.
Bond yields down up 10 basis points. It is catastrophic in the markets today for Britain. The markets do not like this instability. This is higher than when Liz Truss was booted out of office for similar causes, by the way. This will be very bad news for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. What will she say about all of this? Her government is now creating more financial instability and will push up borrowing costs, which is going to have to be factored into any future budget. So the key thing for the British public at home to know is, while this chaos is going on in Downing Street and we don't know any more about it, you are going to pay for it. You are paying out of your pocket for this chaos.
Well, somebody who's been writing about this chaos is Associate Editor at The Telegraph, Gordon Rayner. Very good morning to you, Gordon. Fantastic article in The Telegraph that went up last night. And it's stark, isn't it, that the buzzword here doesn't seem to be resign. It seems to be timetable. And it is to avoid this chaos that we're already seeing on the markets.
Well, yeah, but the problem with timetabling your departure is that, as you just sort of mentioned there, you could be talking about Keir Starmer coming out and saying we'll have a leadership election in the summer and perhaps announce a new leader at the Labour Party conference in the autumn. That's certainly what Andy Burnham's supporters are hoping for, because that obviously would give him an opportunity to try and get back into Parliament. But the problem with that is that you, rather than having chaos, you then have paralysis. You have a situation where you have a prime minister who everybody knows is on his way out. He would be not so much a lame duck as a dead duck. You would have civil servants who would just down tools. They wouldn't want to implement new policy because they would be thinking, what's the point? The next guy might reverse that. You would have cabinet ministers who would be looking to think, well, what does the next guy want? Not what does this prime minister want, so the cabinet wouldn't be with him. You'd have a prime minister going to G7 and NATO and having to represent Britain. He wouldn't be listened to because all of the other leaders would be thinking, well, you're not going to be the guy. And as you've been saying, it would cause huge instability in the markets because they would be worrying about who comes next. Could it be a very left-wing government? There's no guarantee if you're an Andy Burnham fan that he even gets into Parliament. He would have to win an election. And in the current climate, even in the Northwest, where his stronghold is, the local election showed that, there's no support for Labour. So it's a complete mess. And I think it may well be that events will overtake any decision that Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham or anybody may want to take. I think you may well find that even by the end of today, it becomes obvious that he just can't carry on. In which case he may just have to say, I'm going in very short order. And then you have a situation where they have to choose between perhaps Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner, neither of whom, quite frankly, Labour MPs are massively keen on. So it's a mess, the sort of which we've never really seen before.
But we have seen prime ministers who set out timetables for their departure before, haven't we? Baroness May and Sir Tony Blair, to name two of them. But I suppose the difference was in those instances is the person who was going on to succeed them was already in Parliament, which would not be the case for Andy Burnham.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I think with Blair, it was a fairly smooth transition. Gordon Brown was Chancellor, so he wasn't just he wasn't just in the government. He was in the room when major decisions were being taken. So people could effectively read for Tony Blair. They could just read across to Gordon Brown. It was very straightforward. With Theresa May, you had a situation there, as you said, where everybody who was a contender was already either in government or certainly was an MP. So it was quite easy. The situation with Burnham is, you imagine if Sir Keir Starmer goes to a G7 or a NATO, he can't turn up with Andy Burnham, as, oh, by the way, this is the guy who may succeed me. Andy Burnham's not even an MP. So it's very, very different. And I think that Labour MPs who keep sort of bringing up Gordon Brown as this sort of, soothing way of talking about a transition, they've sort of missed the point, rather. It's not the same at all. And the assumption that Burnham is just going to walk into Parliament to take over is pretty arrogant. And I think that the problem Burnham would have, if we do end up with some sort of timetable, I think is a lot of voters would think, well, hang on a minute, I'm being asked to elect an MP who I want to represent me. You're only here in whatever constituency it is because you want to be Prime Minister. You're not my local representative. You're not interested in my area. You've just turned up so that you can become PM. And I think a lot of voters might be rather turned off by that.
Indeed. Gordon, just a brief thought on this from you. The markets are in absolute free fall this morning. FTSE 100 down 1.13%. The 10-year gilt yields has risen by almost 10 basis points, 0.1%, up to 5.1%, which was 5% last night. This is economic chaos, while the country doesn't even know whether the Prime Minister's going to stay, go. The cabinet ministers doing the rounds aren't giving us any real information. They're giving conflicting information, if anything. This is very bad news for the Chancellor.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that the markets hate is uncertainty, as you know, and that's why I think that if the Prime Minister was to set out a timetable, he's not providing certainty, he's just providing months of uncertainty, and that's why I think it's just a really bad idea.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time, indeed.
Thank you, Gordon Rayner. Thank you.
All right, so to our top story this morning. The Prime Minister faces a day of reckoning as the countdown begins to his most crucial cabinet meeting of his premiership.
Yes, the Keir Starmer is used to addressing his government at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, but today the roles could be reversed, with reports that top ministers will use the opportunity to tell the Prime Minister it's time to go.
Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is among 3 reported cabinet ministers leading the charge and urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign, with up to 79 Labour MPs now joining the growing mutiny.
After Sir Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling onto his premiership failed to rally backbenchers, is it now only a matter of hours until he gives in to the growing pressure?
Yes, it is all eyes on Downing Street indeed. And to give us a new perspective this morning, we're now joined by former Labour MP Khalid Mahmood. Khalid, thank you so much for joining us to talk about what's happening in your party today. It seems that not only is the cabinet split, but your entire party is split between your centre-left and your further left flanks. What do you want to happen? What do you think is the best outcome? Should the Prime Minister resign after cabinet this morning?
Well, I think he has to go, and I think the writing's on the wall. Everybody's seen that. But I think most importantly, what he needs to do now today is to say how soon he's going to go, because as you already alluded in just the piece just before this, is that we need to stabilize the markets. We need to give certainty to the markets and putting ourselves in a greater peril economically. We need to stabilize that to make sure we move forward. So that's the key thing now at the moment, is to give a quick date which needs to move forward. And there are colleagues and friends, and I know Andy Burnham is a good friend of mine, but the fact is it's a very difficult situation, as the local elections have shown. The problem is that wherever Andy goes, are we certain that we will get Andy in? But I think we just have to do with where we are at the moment, and we need to get a quick timetable and move forward.
Your friend Andy Burnham have confidence that he would win a by-election? Because we're just talking to Gordon Rayner there, journalist from The Telegraph, and he was saying there's an arrogance to assuming that Andy Burnham would win a by-election, not only because, as we saw last week in the local elections, is there such a thing as a Labour safe seat anymore? You've lost Wales, you've lost Labour heartlands, you've lost the Red Wall. And secondly, many local people would say, well, you're not here for my local concerns, you're not here for me, you're here because you want to be Prime Minister.
Well, that's right. I mean, I don't think we can take people for granted. I think part of the problem's been is people feel that they've been taken for granted and that we haven't delivered what we should have delivered. I think the economy is in a very difficult position. I understand the issues around both Ukraine and Iran wars, which have had a huge effect on our economy. We need to move forward. The cost of living is phenomenal. The cost of energy is phenomenal. And I think we need to start to move to stabilize the whole situation and to be able to deliver a stability to the country, and that's what's most important.
Khalid, as well, we were saying with the shots here live on Downing Street, as we expect cabinet ministers to roll in shortly. Of course, some of those cabinet ministers have reportedly already urged the Prime Minister to go. Do you think if that magic number, 81, I know they're not backing a specific... I know that the rules here are different to Tory party rules and they need to back a specific candidate, but what we're hearing journalists say is that this is a magic number, 80 to 81 MPs on the Labour benches, joining the growing calls for the Prime Minister to go, may trigger the rest of the Cabinet to say, enough is enough, you've got to go, and hand out your timetable to leave. Do you expect to hear that today?
Well, I think it has to happen. I think the Cabinet is now going to pluck up the courage to move forward. There's only a couple of MPs' names that are needed. I know that they haven't backed a specific candidate, but the threshold of 81 has been reached, will be reached very quickly. And I think we just need to move forward and tell the country that we are there to stabilize the whole thing. And if all of us have the interest of our nation, the country at heart, then we need to move quickly to ensure our economy is stabilized.
We'll see Wes Streeting on manoeuvres today. He's been very quiet publicly in the past few days.
Well, look, I think that we know that a number of people are keen to take over, and Wes is perhaps the number one on that list. He's got significant support in the PLP. But I think we just got to now be upfront and to say that Wes, if he has to be upfront and say, well, I'm going to move forward now, take the time. Angela's there. If she wants to make a move, let's do that. But let's be honest to ourselves. Let's be honest to the Labour Party and the movement, and let's all be honest to the country and just move forward and not more of these shenanigans carrying on.
OK,
Colin Mahmood, thank you so much. Former Labour MP there, joining us live this morning to give his thoughts there. He thinks the Prime Minister should go. We're now joined by GB News presenter Andrew Pearce here in the studio for his take. Andrew, absolute chaos. The bond yield is spiking. The FTSE 100 is crashing. We don't know what the Prime Minister's doing. We've got conflicting reports from Cabinet Ministers like Darren Jones. 1 minute saying there's a decision to make, 1 minute saying, oh, he's going to fight on. It is utter chaos.
It is. And remember about these bond markets, which affects all of us. Andy Burnham, who is the favourite to take over, did tell us just a few weeks ago politicians shouldn't obsess about the bond markets, remember? This is the man who could be our next Prime Minister.
Crazy.
So my instinct is the Prime Minister would try to brazen it out. If they reach the magic figure of 81, that's still not 81 saying he's got to go. It's just 81 saying set a timetable. But I still think he's going to be there till party conference.
When they say set a timetable, what do they mean?
They mean he's got to, as Theresa May did. Theresa May in May, whatever it was, 2019, said, I will stand down as Tory leader on. That gives time for the party to have a leadership contest. They did it very quickly. It will take Labour 3 months to elect a Labour leader.
The difference being with Theresa May is that her successor was in government, if not Parliament. So
that's right.
In this instance, Andy Burnham,
the favourite,
isn't even in Westminster.
Exactly.
And we're hearing from Gordon Rayner saying it's arrogant to think he'd win in a by-election.
What is a safe Labour seat? He's the mayor of Greater Manchester. Last week, Labour lost 25 seats in Greater Manchester and the council elections. So I talked to some of the people allegedly who are thinking of standing down. They say, we're not. Because the idea would be he stands down as mayor, a Labour MP with a so-called safe seat stands down, and then Andy Burnham gives him a peerage. Burnham doesn't win. The poor old has-been, who stood down, doesn't get the peerage either. It's a big risk for Labour.
And then if he leaves the mayoralty vacant, goes to reform.
Of course it does. It's a massive, massive risk for Labour. That's why there's such chaos. And I've talked to Labour MPs, I've talked to ministers in the last 24 hours. They are in a terrible position because they know he can't do it. They know the speech yesterday was hopeless, as usual. Hopeless.
Angela Rayner said it was a mistake not to let Burnham stand. Is she right? Would it have been better for the Prime Minister to say, do you know what, let him give it a go? Because by all accounts, they may not have won that seat. It might have been a lot closer, but let's face it, the Greens were ahead by, 3,000, 4,000 votes from Reform, and Labour were in third place. That means that Labour would have had to make up 6,000 votes, even with a name like Andy Burnham.
He was storing up problems he should have let him stand, and he might not have won, and in which case none of this would be happening, because the person who is most optimistic now is Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. He's been on manoeuvres for months. He told us in 2018 he was going to be Prime Minister by 2028. Well, it's only 2 years away. He's on manoeuvres. He wants a quick, swift leadership contest because Angela Rayner is disabled by her problems over her tax. She's still under investigation by HMRC over the £40,000 stamp duty she didn't pay, and Burnham doesn't have a seat. Or we get Ed Miliband throws his hat in the ring. God help us all.
But for Wes Streeting, it's a very small window of opportunity before the left wing of the party gets their act together. It has to be this week. Do you think it could be today?
I still think the Prime Minister will set out a timetable. I don't think he's going to do it before the King's speech. Got to remember that. The King is making that speech tomorrow. Does the King want to be embarrassed by making a King's speech tomorrow on behalf of his government and his Prime Minister when the Prime Minister has announced today he's going?
Yeah, one of our guests today put it as constitutional crisis territory.
Absolutely. And he's dragged the King already into a constitutional area by making him go to America with Donald Trump. It went off very well. The King will not be very impressed by this. The King's speech, where the Prime Minister says, it's not going to be my government in 6 months. My government will.
Ridiculous.
It's inconceivable, I think, that he can do it today. If he does, we're in a constitutional crisis.
Interesting stuff. Andrew Pearce, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and you will be covering the aftermath of what I think is going to be the most historic cabinet meeting. Well, I say that for years. It's only been a couple since the last historic cabinet meeting.
I know. And don't forget, Margaret Thatcher resigned in cabinet.
Of course she did.
In tears.
Churchill's three-day cabinet.
Three-day cabinet.
We've seen David Lammy arriving. Is that Lord Hermer with him, perhaps?
Yeah,
there,
David Lammy,
like
by the way.
There's David Lammy looking very, very cheerful,
and
smiling.
David Lammy, who's Parliamentary Private Secretary, his bag carrier, was one of the 4 ministerial aides who resigned.
That's
so the
right.
Deputy Prime Minister's, the Health Secretary's one's gone. This is But
a brave face there from David Lammy, all smiles, heading into 10
Well, he
Downing
doesn't want to
Street.
lose the Prime Minister because he's not going to be Deputy Prime Minister under anybody else, is he? Because he's useless.
Well, he is one of them saying that he needs to stay.
Yeah,
but as you
of
were
course he
saying,
is.
Alex, Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, a very confused picture this morning. In some media rounds, he's saying the Prime Minister is going to stay. In others, he's saying he's got a decision to make.
It's fascinating. Some journalists are actually saying that Darren Jones may be one of the so-called leadership contenders that is sharpening his knives, which would be utterly incredible. But it wouldn't surprise me.
They're making the Tories look like an organised, coherent rabble.
Yeah. Absolutely are indeed.
It's
This is the
unbelievable.
Prime Minister who said there'd be no more chaos,
Absolutely.
no more
He did.
infighting.
They're even worse than the Tories. and that's
Politics that
saying
would
something.
tread lightly on your lives. Remember that?
I know that Britain's newsroom today, it's going to be here Andrew's going to be here with Miriam Cates from 9:30. It is going to be absolutely phenomenal box office TV. Come and watch Andrew and Miriam in just, 45 minutes' time.
Or listen to us on the radio.
We will keep you posted, by the way. We're staying with these live shots here of Downing Street. We will see more cabinet ministers, of course, make their way into the black door of number 10.
We'll try and read their body language.
We will.
shall we?
We'll zoom in on their faces if we can for you to see
Watch
whether
the Home
those...
Secretary. Watch the Home
Yes.
Secretary looking
Yes.
firmly
Rather
at her
moved.
shoes as
Yeah.
she
Watch
walks
the
in.
Health Secretary as well, Wes
Andrew says
Streeting.
it's all in the shoes. Right, look, joining us now, Christo Fifast and Sebastian Salek. Good morning, you two. Christo, we are witnessing perhaps the start of the end of the Prime Minister's reign. I think it's safe to say at this point in time, after all of this drama, it is very implausible to see how the Prime Minister makes it outside of a week. I mean, I know we could say it could happen today. It could be 10 o'clock, could be 10:30, 11 o'clock, where the Prime Minister gives some indication he's going to make a timeline speech, but it's implausible to think that the Prime Minister is going to get away with it for an entire week.
I think that you're right, though I do worry about what's going to happen going forward, because I think better the devil you know. I don't think Starmer's done a very good job, but I'm so worried that the party as a whole, the Labour Party as a whole, will think that the solution is to go further left. I don't think it is. I think Andrew Pearce made a really good point about the King's speech and about not usurping the King's speech and the embarrassment that might cause. But you mentioned Darren Jones. Now, I'm surprised he was able to do any interviews today, because he was pretty down at the Dover, counting the women and children that he says are the only ones in the boats, remember? Why? This is the problem with the arrogance of this government, right? Because Darren Jones is not appearing on this channel this morning, right? Keir Starmer yesterday clearly doing a speech not for those people that have turned to reform, but for his own backbenchers. The arrogance of these people, because there is no point in Darren Jones talking to the kind of media that already sort of covertly support the government. There's no point in them talking to an echo chamber. The people that Darren Jones should be talking to are actually precisely the people on this channel. The people that Keir Starmer should be talking to is precisely the people who are watching this channel. And by not doing that, it precisely demonstrates the problems that they face, the arrogance and the people they're not actually broadcasting to.
And perhaps if they had, Christo, their message may have been delivered more clearly and effectively.
Yeah, there's no point in talking to the people who are convinced by you already. You've got to win over the people
You've got to win over the masses.
And that's why I actually respect to Wes Streeting. He comes on this channel
Yes,
quite
he
a lot.
does.
Because actually, that's who you've got to talk to.
Well, and actually, to you, Sebastian Salek, you come on this channel.
Thank you
and
very
I know
much.
it can be difficult for you here sometimes. And I do say this, and I mean this with the greatest of respect. It can be a hard job being one of the only Labour supporters here on the channel. But people forget, when we polled our audience at the last general election, they voted for Labour. This is the incredible thing about all of this. But look, anyway, enough talking about us. The Cabinet is arriving for this massive crunch meeting, Sebastian, this morning, where the Prime Minister's job is seemingly on the line. We're keeping with these live pictures here. We will discuss this as they roll in, of course. What do you expect is going to happen following that cabinet meeting?
Well, I don't know what I think is going to happen, but here's what could be a neat solution, because we've identified the potential constitutional issue of getting the King to lay out a speech that then isn't going to be followed up on. We've also talked about the possibility of a timeline that could be up to 1 year. Well, guess what? A parliamentary term is often a year long. This last one was 2 years, but you could feasibly see, OK, we're going to do another year, we're going to enact everything we're about to announce, and then we will hand over in an orderly fashion. Maybe not the best idea politically, but at least it would avoid that crisis.
But it's not a good idea for the country. You've been talking about stasis all morning. I mean, Gordon Rayner in the Telegraph talking about civil servants downing tools, saying that Sir Keir Starmer, he'd be having to go to the G7 this summer. I mean, if people thought he was relevant before, he'd be even more of an irrelevance.
Well, remember that, look, I don't necessarily think it is the best idea, but remember that that's quite normal, because in a lot of places we have fixed-term parliaments. It's quite normal, as we see for Macron in France at the moment. He's on his way out next year, and that's just a normal part of their constitutional function. So you have, I mean, look, uncharitably call them lame ducks all the time, because you just come to the end of your term, and that will be ostensibly what's going on for Starmer here.
That's absolute, with respect, complete nonsense. There's a difference between a fixed term and coming to the end of your fixed term and someone who is basically so loathed by both the public and the party that they are being kicked out and have had no other option.
But the function is the same. You're saying, I'm going to step down at this date. Well, they will be able to get stuff done because they still have a majority in Parliament. So those laws that are going to be announced in the King's speech are still going to get passed.
I'm sure
that has not been a problem for this government.
Whipping the MPs will make a real difference. All of those people, with the respect, they won't want to be chastised by the Prime Minister who's leaving.
There were already accusations of the tail wagging the dog with the backbenchers and Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, where would that leave him now? If we're setting out a timetable for 6 months, it wouldn't be a lame duck, it would be a dead duck.
On certain issues, on welfare, and you can understand why Labour MPs are very, very unhappy to cut welfare, but on other issues they were expected to see, it's largely in line. And remember that a lot of these MPs were chosen because they sit ideologically alongside Starmer, so these are things they're naturally going to believe in anyway.
Can I make an impassioned plea this morning on behalf of ducks? They're both lame and dead. They're getting really bad press this morning with these comparisons, actually, these poor ducks.
Well, look, in the last 24 hours, Christo, we've seen some of the top left of centre, and I say left of centre, I mean the Blue Labour group, the Labour Growth Group. These are Wes Streeting allies, and we've heard so much speculation that this is all a coup by Wes Streeting.
Who's been very quiet.
Who's been very quiet, as you correctly say, Ellie. And we hear, of course, many journalists saying that today is the day when that magic 80 number goes, that the Health Secretary is willing to put the knife in and run, because this is the prime moments for him to stand.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'm sorry to have raised a chuckle when you said the Labour Growth Group, because I thought that was a contradiction in terms. However, I do think that the problem is the King's speech and the timing of that. And let's not forget this 80 number is just a symbolic number. It's not 80 people, 80 MPs that are behind a candidate. But where you are absolutely correct is that if Streeting doesn't show his hand soon, he's going to miss the window because Rayner might get her tax affairs back. Burnham, I actually think, is a bit of a busted flush. How are they going to get Burnham?
I think it's a ploy, Christo. I think it's a ploy by Angela Rayner to buy herself more time. She needs to clear up her tax issue. And the best way to avoid saying, I can't say anything right now because I've got a tax problem, is to say, let's wait for Andy Burnham, who she very well knows. There's no such thing as a safe seat. Look at the political map of Manchester. It is turquoise and green.
Which would be... Oh, God, if Angela Rayner became Prime Minister, could you imagine? We've heard enough speeches from Keir Starmer about how he's working class. We'd hear about nothing else. We would hear nothing else.
But how unusual, though, only to have two candidates in the mix at the moment. How weird is that? Not just
how mediocre is
that?
Well,
it's quite normal for a Labour leadership contest, or indeed a Tory one, to have lots more names, and we just aren't getting a sense of who they are.
We did just get a viewer message in saying they think Al Carnes is going to come right through the middle and take this. What do you make of that, Sebastian?
He's been making subtle noises. It wouldn't surprise me if he stood, but you have to remember he's only been an MP since 2024,
Yes, that's a benefit now, isn't it, though? Yeah. It's a benefit to come in fresh. Yeah. This is what happened with David Cameron, if you remember back into just before 2000, it was 2007, 2008, when he became party leader. Yeah. He beat out David Davis, who was, of course, touted as the next leader.
Yes, but he was in opposition, and he had 4 years in opposition.
That is very true. He won't have the cabinet-level experience. the senior office experience. But that might help at this point in time. Fresh faces. I think the British public want fresh faces.
But I think the problem is, when it was Cameron, whenever there has been a Conservative leadership contest, it's always been the most anti-Europe, furthest right candidate. Whether they do that when they get into the position that has appealed to the party faithful, Al Cairns would have to do that the opposite way. And then you would end up in a situation where you have a very left-wing backbench who would then have a leader, Prime Minister, who would have to govern to the right in order to solve the problems. I think we'd end up in the same position that we're in now. Any substantive change that needed to be gotten through wouldn't be, because the left of the party wouldn't allow it.
Yeah, just if you're joining us now live, it's 8:54 a.m. or just about to go 8:54 a.m. We are staying live shots here with Number 10 because we are expecting Cabinet Ministers to be entering those black doors between now and, in the next 15 minutes before the Cabinet meeting gets started officially at 9:30 a.m. So we'll bring you those live shots. Who knows what their faces are going to be like today? David Lammy and Lord Homer have already arrived. They looked very gleeful despite the noise. Maybe perhaps
huge smiles across their faces.
Huge smiles.
Put on their brave face this morning.
Can you imagine being in the back of the car with them two? Good God, what a dull conversation that would be.
Sebastian.
Sorry.
It is going to be potentially a history-making cabinet. Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall?
Oh, my God, yes. Yes, because you've got some people who... I mean, there are lots of people who have made their mind up about things who are not saying it publicly yet. And I wonder whether that starts to come out in a meeting like that.
One of our guests has just said they're hearing reports that the Prime Minister is going to go around the table and ask each person individually, should I stay or should I go?
Oh, my God.
He's going to go off the basis of that group.
I mean, that would be remarkable.
But he's a man of process. That would make sense.
Doesn't that just sum up the lawyer in it? Let's make it democratic. You know, going around to make a decision
Well, it
yourself.
would be consistent, wouldn't it? Very consistent. When the war happened, Donald Trump had famously said that when he spoke to Sir Keir Starmer said, I have to ask my team, which I suspect means the cabinet. It's very consistent.
He's going to put
this is Starmerism. We talk about what Starmerism is,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's all get our easels out and write a name down.
This was fascinating. Dan Hodges' column in the Daily Mail today is quite revealing about what he thinks is going on, at least speaking to allies of leadership contenders, which there seems to be many, by the way. He said the Parliamentary Labour Party, this insider here, the Parliamentary Labour Party are going to go out there and plough the road. Then ministers will begin to step down. And finally, the Cabinet will move. The campaign chief of another leadership contender told him, basically what's happening is the Parliamentary Labour Party have launched a no-confidence motion in Keir Starmer. When they reach the magic number of 80 names, the Cabinet will tell him it's time to go. Well, we are minutes away from that Cabinet meeting, and as far as we know, there's 79, perhaps,
79 Labour MPs, yes.
Be interesting to see whether it gets over 80 after that meeting, when they're not convinced and they come out and you end up at...
Well, this is publicly declared. We don't know what the private ones are, and you always should go off the assumption if there's 80 publicly or 79 publicly declared, you can almost double that number in Parliament, as it was with the Tories. So do we expect, if this speculation here in the Daily Mail is correct, that there could be a move by the Cabinet in the next half an hour or so, Sebastian, to ask the Prime Minister gently, step aside now and avoid being forced to go?
I mean, of all of the crises days we've had, this feels like the most critical, doesn't it? I feel like if something's going to happen, I certainly wouldn't rule it out being today.
Do you think we could see Cabinet resignations today?
Quite possibly. Quite possibly. I mean, we've already seen murmurings, haven't we? And we've seen some people who are quite unhappy in their positions. I certainly wouldn't rule that out.
Let's go back to Boris Johnson. Let's remember this is all so reminiscent of what happened to Boris. Remember that? He had a cabinet meeting.
It wasn't that long ago,
It wasn't that long ago. And even when he had cabinet ministers going to Number 10, similarly to what happened last night, seemingly, telling him to go, he refused to move. And when he refused to move, Christo, what happened then was the following 24, 48 hours, a slew of ministers went, junior ministers went, things like we're seeing today with PPSs, the private secretaries resigning, and then, of course, cabinet ministers resign, Rishi Sunak putting the final knife in as well.
Yeah, and I think that is what is going to happen, because Starmer will not go easily. He said as much yesterday in his speech, where he said, I will fight on, the speech that will now go down in history as one of the most misjudged, dull, make or break speeches out there. So unless the cabinet openly, I think, revolt, I don't think that he is going to go anywhere. But again, I just want to return to what Andrew Pearce said. Could you imagine if you had a cabinet in revolt 24 hours before a king's speech setting out the agenda of that cabinet and government? It is, I mean, it's putting the chaos of the Conservatives on a new level. It really is. And this is not what we were supposed to be getting. This is not great for the United Kingdom.
But it may save the Prime Minister. It may save him. It will give him the chance for his MPs and his cabinet to hear out his policy agenda, which we're seemingly told. Sebastian, your thoughts on the speech yesterday?
His policy agenda,
well, that's what we want to know, because we were told there's going to be this radical change. The speech yesterday seemingly told us nothing new. It's all policies we've already heard announced by the PM. Do you think that if he survives another 24 hours to the King's speech, it might give him better odds?
Possibly. I mean, look, there were a couple of things to say. One is that I think he did have an opportunity to go further yesterday and be more radical. But on the other hand...
Are you not happy with it, Sebastian?
I would have wanted to hear more from him, but can you really do that? You've got your King's speech all wrapped up, you've got your legislative activity for the next year. Can you rip all of that up and write a new load of legislation in a few hours? Probably not, so I don't know how much choice he really had there. The other thing to say about this is that, remember, he has hit rock bottom before. We had the Hartlepool by-election in 2021, went terribly for Labour. Starmer himself, by all accounts, wanted to resign. He was talked out of it by his team. So he's been here before, and there's one thing that we can take from watching this man navigate Parliament, and it's don't underestimate him. And that's why I'm so loath to make predictions today, because he could decide to soldier on.
And anything could happen. Sebastian, Christo, thank you so much for your analysis. It's been really good to have you with us today.
Indeed.
Just half an hour to go until this cabinet meeting. The cabinet are already arriving at number 10 as the Prime Minister faces a day of reckoning.
Yes, David Lammy, Lord Hermer are the first to turn up as the countdown begins to the most crucial cabinet meeting of Sir Keir Starmer's premiership.
Sir Keir Starmer is used to addressing his government at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, but today roles could be reversed, with reports that top ministers will use the opportunity to tell the Prime Minister it's time to go.
The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is among 3 reported cabinet members leading the charge and urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign, with approximately 79 Labour MPs now joining the very growing mutiny.
Well, after Sir Keir Starmer's last-ditch attempt to cling on to his premiership failed to rally backbenchers, is it now only a matter of hours until he gives in to the growing pressure?
GB News chief political correspondent Catherine Forster is joining us now live from Downing Street. Catherine, the atmosphere looks utterly incredible there. Tell us what's going on.
Yes, good morning from Downing Street, where there are dozens and dozens, actually over 100, I would say, banks of cameras, reporters. It feels like a massive day, and we have been here before. Are we about to see yet another Prime Minister taken out? If that happens, if we get another Prime Minister, that would be 6 PMs in 7 years. It seems to be becoming a habit, but this Labour government was elected on a promise to stop the chaos. And here we are with nearly 80 Labour MPs openly calling for the Prime Minister to go. A civil war in the Labour Party. They are having a collective nervous breakdown, but there is no unity on what to do next. And I think all hangs now on this crucial cabinet meeting set to begin in the next half hour. Now, we saw Rachel Reeves arrived about half an hour or so ago. The car went pretty much as close as it could to the door of the Treasury. David Lammy walked up. There was only one shout. Is it time for the Prime Minister to go? We know that the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has told him that he should set out a timetable. We know that the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, has said similar. Previously, we know too that people like Lord Hermer and Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary, are saying no, cling on. And Darren Jones, who is let's see who's coming now, Darren Jones. Darren Jones, is it time for the Prime Minister to go?
Have confidence in the Prime Minister.
well, smiling and tight-lipped. But Darren Jones is one of the key allies of the Prime Minister, and he has been speaking this morning, and he's been saying he can't get ahead of any decision that the Prime Minister might make, that he's listening to colleagues and talking to colleagues. Darren Jones also did say earlier, though, that he thought the majority of people did not want the Prime Minister to go at all. And I've spoken to people in Downing Street and people more broadly in Labour who feel very sad and really quite depressed at what is going on. I'm very worried at what is coming next, because the Prime Minister said yesterday he's not going anywhere because the country would be plunged into chaos. And it feels like we're already there, because the markets have opened this morning. The FTSE has plunged. 10-year gilt yields are up. And as Paul Johnson, who used to head up the Institute for Fiscal Studies, has said, borrowing has got more expensive for all of us. We're all in a very bad economic situation already. We've got war in Iran, we've got war in Ukraine, we've got the Strait of Hormuz blocked, our bills going up, and all of this instability is making matters worse. The Prime Minister's allies say, look, this is not the time to change leader. He got a huge majority. He's good on the international stage. There are people horrified. Who's coming in now?
Is it over for Keir Starmer? Will you ask the Prime Minister to step down, Minister?
I expect they're all going to be very tight-lipped, keeping their powder dry. But somebody who's been very quiet is the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. There are allies of Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the most popular Labour politician in the country, furious at this sort of timetable that seems to be unfolding that might mean that Andy Burnham doesn't have the chance to run 4 p.m. if he can't get a seat, if the NEC block him, and pointing the finger at the Health Secretary. But I was talking to one of the Health Secretary's key allies this morning, and he said that's categorically not true. He said Wes Streeting has not asked anybody to go over the top for him, though one of his ministerial aides resigned last night. And he said, look, Wes Streeting has been honest. He's told the Prime Minister some time ago that he won't launch a challenge, but if the Prime Minister's position becomes untenable, as it is looking increasingly that it is, that he is ready. So he said at least he is being honest. There's plenty of people would like the Prime Minister's job. Angela Rayner, she has seemed to fall behind Andy Burnham. She said twice in the last couple of days that he should never have been blocked. The trouble is, he isn't here. Things could very well run away. And it is just quite extraordinary, because Labour don't do this. Labour don't get Prime Ministers very often, and they don't get rid of them. So we are in uncharted territory here, except for the fact that it feels like it's becoming a pattern, because we had Theresa May, we had Boris Johnson, we had Liz Truss, we had Rishi Sunak, now we've got Keir Starmer. I have a feeling of déjà vu being here on other days like this, and here we are again. And also, when I got here at 5:30 this morning, all the streets are closed because it's the King's speech tomorrow, laying out the government's legislative agenda. There were marching bands at 5:30 on St James's, practising for that. And here we are, and we don't know whether the Prime Minister today will decide to announce that he's going to set a timetable to go, or whether he will be carrying on. Let's see who is coming up the street now. So here we've got the Business Secretary, Peter Kyle, and Liz Kendall, both smiling.
Will you ask the Prime Minister to step down?
What happened to stopping the chaos?
The Prime Minister lost confidence in the Cabinet. Should he fight on, Ministers?
All very smiling. Of course they would be, but the mood is very bleak amongst many people. I've spoken to people that are just horrified and just think, what on earth are these MPs doing? And remember that Nigel Farage and Reform ran on a platform of vote Reform, get Keir Starmer out. Some in Labour are saying, what are we doing? We're literally gifting this. Let's see who anybody else is coming up the street. Can't see anybody else at the moment. moment. But the atmosphere is very febrile. We don't know where we will be by lunchtime. It's possible that the ship is steadied, we get to the King's speech, but it does feel at the moment like the Prime Minister's days are numbered, and who replaces him, deeply, deeply unclear.
Catherine, fantastic question there to Peter Kyle and Liz Kendall. What happened to stopping the chaos? We should ask them, are there adults in the room? Remember when we were told that was going to be the case? Because we should reflect, shouldn't we, the extraordinary timing of all of this. We've got a cabinet in crisis, potentially later on this morning, a cabinet in revolt, and in just over 24 hours' time, we've got the King's speech.
Who of the first cabinet ministers we saw go in for this meeting were David Lammy?
I feel at this point that you really couldn't make this up. If you were writing the plot for some Westminster drama, it would almost seem too ridiculous to be true. Now, we always knew that the local elections and the elections in Wales and Scotland were going to be the point of maximum danger for the Prime Minister, but I think the feeling was that probably Labour wouldn't move because there was no agreement on who would take his place. Whatever happened to look before you leap. Now, we had Catherine West, that backbench MP, saying to the Cabinet the other day, get your act together and move against him or I will. She then said she hadn't even looked at the rules. Then she sent out a letter yesterday calling for a transition in September. Then she went, oh, actually, that was a typo. I meant by September. It is a picture of chaos. The markets are not liking this. Borrowing is getting more expensive. And who is running the country? We have a country that since the financial crisis, we haven't had the growth. Public services are not good. We're paying more tax than ever. People feel that things are not working. They voted for change with Labour. Less than 2 years on, people are thinking, you haven't brought the change. They're looking at reform. They're looking at Plaid in Wales. Is the country increasingly becoming ungovernable? It's such a mess, and there's no clear way out or no clear good option at this point.
Catherine, we're expecting, of course, a seismic King's speech tomorrow. The Prime Minister has promised radical change, not incremental change. It seems if he doesn't at least provide some sort of timeline to leave today or indeed resign, we will be getting that King's speech, which would be quite something, wouldn't it, given the backdrop of his political career being completely under threat at the moment. What kind of scenes would we see in Parliament? That if tomorrow the Prime Minister's already handed in his resignation in advance, so to speak, what would that do to the political chaos or the circus that would play itself out in the House of Commons?
Well, I think it'll be incredibly embarrassing for the King reading out an agenda which is likely to be null and void, because whoever comes in, they are going to want to change things, aren't they? If it's Andy Burnham, he's got all sorts of plans that will involve a lot more spending. He previously said, don't worry about the bond markets. I think people like Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer would actually say you absolutely have to worry about the bond markets because the cost of borrowing, you know, we are already paying $100 billion a year just on the debt interest. We are not in a good place. Angela Rayner, what would she do? Ed Miliband, what would he do? He apparently doesn't want the job. He would favour Andy Burnham. But what if things run away and Andy Burnham cannot get back? And again, if Wes Streeting get it, there will be a large number of people furious, feeling that this has been some sort of stitch-up. There's no guarantee that Wes Streeting will be allowed to remain in power before the next election. So for a party, we heard, didn't we, the grown-ups are back in charge. I was looking at the speech that Sir Keir Starmer made when the general election was announced. I was in the room. The phrase is, we will stop the chaos. Who have we got here now?
Is it over for Keir Starmer? Has the Prime Minister lost the dressing room, Minister?
The Labour chair there, they're very good, aren't they, at either smiling or pretending that we don't exist. But all smiles for the cameras, but behind the scenes, a very very different picture, and sadness, real sadness in number 10. People have said to me, look, the Prime Minister is a decent man, there are problems, but what do? Do we just keep getting rid of a Prime Minister every year or so when they're not delivering quickly enough? I think today it really is a case of be careful what you wish for. We don't know where this goes, and we don't know what follows.
In your career, is this the first time you've ever seen a government 1 year in 10 months in where you're shouting at ministers and secretaries of state, asking them whether the Prime Minister's going to resign at this early stage?
No, because it took the Conservatives, 14 years to get to this point. And I thought it was very interesting what Jonathan Hinder, Red Wall MP, said last night. He's calling on the PM to go. He said that the Prime Minister had never been an electoral asset, that basically they got this huge majority because people were so cross with the Tories. Now, look, the Prime Minister did make the Labour Party not scary for people like it had been under Jeremy Corbyn, but actually they got this big majority, but wafer thin. They actually got about 500,000 less votes than Jeremy Corbyn got back in 2019 when they had the worst results since 1935. So it's where those results piled up. But I would say it's nearly a year ago, it was the Hague summit, the NATO summit, where I first asked the Prime Minister if he was confident of leading Labour into the next general election. And the reason I asked that was because of the welfare rebellion, an absolute fiasco. They wanted to take £5 billion off the welfare bill, and there was a big rebellion by enough of MPs who just said no. At that point, Labour MPs realised that if enough of them didn't like something, they could simply stop it happening. And I felt that at that point, the Prime Minister's authority seriously began to drain away. And we have seen so many U-turns. I've lost count, to be honest, maybe 16. The government has been blown around, and you would have thought with a big majority that they could have done whatever they wanted. The reality is that the majority was so big, there were not enough jobs for all these people. So lots of MPs thinking they're going to lose their seat at the next election, and they've got nothing to lose.
Catherine, we're hearing this morning reports that the Prime Minister, chairing this cabinet meeting this morning, is going to go around every person at that table and ask them individually, should I stay or should I go? And what he does next is going to be based on that group vote. Does that sound as something that Sir Keir Starmer would do? Would he base it on the opinion of his cabinet?
Well, I think if he doesn't have the majority of the cabinet behind him, it's impossible really to see how he continues. It's a numbers game in the end, isn't it? And if he doesn't take the temperature and decide to go with what the consensus is, then we might start to see cabinet resignations, maybe not today, but maybe after the King's speech or down the line. The truth is, I think that nobody except Sir Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria really know exactly what is going on in the Prime Minister's head right now, because I was at that speech yesterday where he said very firmly, I know I've got my doubters, I'm going to prove them wrong. He was adamant that he was going nowhere because he didn't want to plunge the country into chaos. He gave an interview just at the weekend saying he was determined he'd fight the next election and there'd be 10 years of national renewal. It's impossible to say. He's pretty tough, he's pretty ruthless. He came in, he managed to transform the Labour Party, or so we thought, but since he's come in, he seems to have been blown around. There's been repeated churn in number 10, so many chiefs of staff, heads of communications. We've had the Peter Mandelson debacle, and it does feel still that for all he says he's here for working people, it's not quite clear still what the Prime Minister believes, what he doesn't believe. He says something at one point, then down the line he says something different. To give you an example, on the two-child benefit cap, the government came in adamant that it was not affordable to lift the two-child benefit cap, and there was a rebellion over that, and the Labour Party took the whip off a whole load of Labour MPs who rebelled. Fast forward a year or so, and they decide that they will be able to afford it, even though the economic picture is still really, really bleak. And now they are championing that as one of their greatest achievements. So there is a lack of consistency. And I thought somebody was, no one getting out of the car. Apologies, I'm a bit distracted. I see all the cameras move. Oh, someone is about to come out through the Foreign Office. Let's see who it is. Basically, people come up the street from Downing Street, what I can see, or they come through just behind the camera is the path through to the Foreign Office. A lot of them like to come through that way because it gives us less time to shout at them. I can't see who's coming through. Let's see who it is now.
Is it over for Keir Starmer?
Steve Reid.
Will you ask the Prime Minister to step down? Has the Prime Minister lost the confidence of the Cabinet?
Steve Reid, again smiling, but he is one of the Prime Minister's key cheerleaders. What happened to stopping the chaos, Pat McFadden?
Is it over for Keir Starmer? Should he fight on, Minister?
Of course, it's Pat McFadden there, the Previous Cabinet Secretary, now Department of Work and Pensions. Yeah.
Two of the Prime Minister's loyalists. We know that Steve Reid, the Housing Secretary, was talking to the Prime Minister last night and urging him to hang on. Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, also a key supporter of the Prime Minister. And Pat McFadden has been as well. He's been wheeled out on so many morning rounds, safe on broadcast. But even he, in the last couple of weeks, has started to seem like it's becoming harder for him to keep insisting that all is well. All is very clearly not well, but the problem is, what does Labour do now? What they are doing is exactly what they slated the Conservatives for, exactly what they promised they would not do, and they got elected promising change, an end to the chaos. They also promised growth. Well, we haven't got that, have they? They also promised very low tax rises and then came in and put taxes up by, what, 70, 80 billion. Of course, they would say that the world has changed. It certainly has. It's much more dangerous. We've got war in Europe.
And Catherine,
we've got the war in the Middle East, and that's why supporters will say this is not the time to take out the Prime Minister. I'm just looking to see somebody else is about to appear any second now. What time are we now? 20 past. Sorry?
Catherine, we hope we will catch a glimpse of Wes Streeting, the man who's seemingly, or many people are saying, is behind this so-called coup against the Prime Minister. Perhaps he will be walking through the doors very shortly.
We haven't seen. We have not seen Wes Streeting yet. Is it time for the PM to go, sir? We are. Pardon me, it's absolute chaos here. We are waiting. We are waiting still. Hold on.
But as Alex was saying, we've seen the loyalists of the Prime Minister so far, haven't we? We're still waiting.
Reeves there
to check my messages.
Look like Rachel. Is it?
Keir Starmer failed Wales, Minister?
Doesn't look as though that's Rachel Reeves. But we've seen the loyalists. We haven't yet seen Wes Streeting. We haven't yet seen Shabana Mahmood. We're still waiting on John Healey. All of those, Catherine, we understand, have called for his resignation.
Yes, well, we don't know about John Healey. There are mixed reports. What John Healey said, what Yvette Cooper said last night as well. But we got some breaking news that Miata Fanbula has resigned, a junior government minister. We had the resignations of some PPSs last night, some junior aides on the government ranks, and you just wonder. Yesterday, I found it almost impossible to keep up with the number of Labour MPs that were calling for the Prime Minister to go. I think we're at nearly 80 now. When I got home, I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. I went to sleep for a couple of hours and I woke up and it was absolute chaos. And it does feel like things are moving very, very fast. As Boris Johnson said, when the herd moves, it moves. It is clearly moving here. It's not a stampede yet. Remember, with Boris Johnson, it was the Chris Pincher affair that brought him down in the end. But what happened was members of his cabinet started to resign. More and more big beasts. Somebody is coming through now.
Should the Prime Minister resign, Minister? Is it over for Keir Starmer? Will you ask the Prime Minister to step down? Wes Streeting
OK, just a reminder. Oh, there we have Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, entering number 10 with a bit of a glum look on his face, actually. He does not look happy to be there.
No, he does not have a smile on his face.
He does not. That's not, indeed.
In the meantime, let's bring you this breaking news, shall we? We've had in the past few minutes. Miatta Fahnbulleh has become the first minister to call for Sir Keir Starmer to go. This is her post on X. This morning, I sent my letter of resignation to the Prime Minister. I urge the Prime Minister to do the right thing for the country and the party and set a timetable for an orderly transition. The message on the doorstep was clear. You, Prime Minister, have lost the trust and confidence of the public.
Important to note that she does indeed hail from the left of the party and is reportedly close to Ed Miliband, interestingly. But here, calling for an orderly transition. That is a timetable, of course. She was appointed Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government on the 6th of September 2025. She has been in Ed Miliband's office prior to that as in a similar role, Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Energy, Security and Net Zero. We now have John Healey, the Defence Secretary, also looking rather glum, entering number 10 there. Catherine.
What happened to stopping the chaos, sir?
What happened to stopping the chaos there? Catherine, of course, Forster there, our chief political correspondent, heckling those ministers as they enter Downing Street.
And the Prime Minister saying yesterday that he wouldn't be resigning. He didn't want to plunge the country into chaos. What I think is quite clear this morning...
There's Ed Miliband.
There's Ed Miliband walking in. What is clear this morning? The country is in chaos. This cabinet is in chaos.
Yes, indeed. Mixture of reactions. Ed Miliband also not looking rather smiley, unlike David Lammy and Lord Hermer were earlier on. A mixture of reactions there from cabinet ministers, some trying to go through that Foreign Office route there to avoid that heckling.
Yeah. Catherine Forster doing a stellar job there for us in Downing Street. She's going to stay with us on those arrivals with that cabinet meeting starting at 9:30. Also starting at 9:30 is Britain's Newsroom. What an incredible show Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates are going to have for you. What's coming up? Silly question.
Yeah.
There's one story in town.
The cabinet normally would last 45 minutes to an hour. If it lasts longer, we think we know what's going on. By the end of it, will we have a timetable for the Prime Minister's departure? But it's tricky because the King's speech is tomorrow and it's very difficult for the King to say my government when the Prime Minister has announced he's going and would be gone by September, October, then there'd have to be another King's speech.
This will be the cabinet meeting that leaks the most, won't it? Because if there's any indication that the cabinet have turned wholly or in majority against the Prime Minister, we will know about that, and I'm sure you'll know about that on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the timings could be crucial, but goodness me, what a situation. My daughter was born in 2010 and she said to me last night, we're about to be on my 8th Prime Minister.
Oh, my goodness. Almost one for every year she's been alive.
We've turned into a banana republic.
Yes, that's what it feels like, doesn't it? Yeah.
We used to be a sea of stability, relative.
We've got that breaking news, haven't we, that a government minister has resigned. That's one of the more senior ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, and she became a minister as soon as she came in as Parliament in 2024, because she's bright and clever, tip for cabinet, and she is close to Ed Miliband, who I think could run the leadership.
It is a carbon copy rerun of what happened in the last days of Boris Johnson. But I think the difference here is that Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party were actually popular when they were elected in 2019. Of course, it didn't remain like that. But the Labour Party were not popular in 2024. They were elected with just 33%, I think, of the vote. And so the Conservative government, when Boris Johnson fell, still had some life in it. There were still some people who were popular. There were people who wanted to make it work. I'm not sure the same can be said about this Labour government. No. I'm not sure that either faction would accept the victory of the other in the forthcoming leadership election. And so it does beg the question, will we see a general election?
And if he's lost the support of the Home Secretary, one of the great offices of state, that's hugely significant. Boris was finished when the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, said they were going. It was all over.
Yeah.
Do you think we could see cabinet resignations today?
If he doesn't go, I think so.
Yes.
But I think they will give him a chance to set out
to make it orderly.
But of course, the timing of the timetable is crucial because if it's before Andy Burnham has a chance to return to Parliament, that will be deeply unpopular with some potential supporters.
And people like Wes Streeting will be pushing for a very early election.
Indeed. And do we want a lame duck Prime Minister for 6 months? That could cause chaos in itself.
Do we actually want Starmer to go? Because the alternative, Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband, my God.
Well, that's the critical question.
What do you think will happen to the markets then?
Well, I mean, this is it. I mean, if you looked at the markets today, they are in absolute free fall. We are literally paying for this chaos every minute it runs. At least if a timetable comes, Miriam, it might give some relief to the markets. There's some certainty.
Although what markets hate is uncertainty, and although there may be a date for his departure, there'll be no certainty about his replacement. And it's like you said earlier, Alex, Starmer doesn't have an ism, but none of them have an ism. We don't know what any of them stand for, so what do the markets
Except Ed Miliband, we know what he stands for, and I think if Andy Burnham doesn't run, he'll be in. He'll be running.
All right.
OK, you two, that's coming up at 9:30, coinciding with this dramatic cabinet meeting. Catherine Forster is outside number 10 for us. Anything could happen. It's Catherine.
Yes, welcome to Downing Street, and it feels absolutely chaotic here. We've got well over 100 press. It feels like an enormous day, and in the last few minutes we've had, yes, the cabinet arriving, but the first ministerial resignation from Miata Fumbale, the MP for Peckham. She is Junior Minister for Devolution, Faith and Communities, and she's written to the Prime Minister saying that she's proud of all that's been achieved, but she's saying the country faces enormous challenges and people are crying out for the scale of change that this requires. The public does not believe that you can lead this change, and nor do I. Then she said, therefore, I urge you to do the right thing for the country and the party and set a timetable for an orderly transition so that a new team can deliver the change we promised the country. Now, the cabinet have been arriving, some of them smiling, nobody's saying anything. People who looked particularly glum, though, I thought, were the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, especially. Many in the party very angry with him. They feel that his fingerprints are all over this because he's now in pole position to run for the leadership. But I